The blizzard screamed like a wounded beast as Daniel Hayes dragged the unconscious woman through knee-deep snow, her designer coat torn and bloodied, her face pale as death itself. He didn't know she was Claire Whitmore, the billionaire whose face graced magazine covers worldwide. He only knew that if he didn't reach his cabin in the next 10 minutes, they'd both be frozen corpses by morning. Sometimes fate chooses the most unlikely heroes, and tonight, a poor single father would save a life that would forever change his own. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The wind howled through the pines like a chorus of the damned, and Daniel Hayes pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his shoulders as he trudged through the deepening snow. His boots, held together with duct tape and prayer, crunched against the frozen ground as he made his way back to the cabin where his 8-year-old son, Tommy, waited alone. Daniel had been out since dawn, checking his trap lines in the unforgiving wilderness of the Colorado Rockies, hoping against hope that today might bring something more than the usual emptiness. 3 rabbits. That's all he'd managed in 12 hours of brutal cold. 3 scrawny rabbits that would have to feed him and Tommy for the next 3 days, maybe 4 if he stretched the meat thin enough. His stomach growled in protest, but he ignored it. Tommy needed the protein more than he did. Growing boys required fuel, and Daniel would starve before he'd watch his son go hungry. The weather had turned vicious an hour ago, transforming from a manageable snowfall into a full-blown blizzard that threatened to erase all landmarks and leave him wandering blind in the white void. But Daniel knew these mountains like the lines on his weathered hands. Every tree, every rock formation, every subtle rise and fall of the land was mapped in his mind through years of survival in this harsh paradise that had become both their sanctuary and their prison. He was perhaps a mile from the cabin when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the symphony of wind and creaking trees. It was faint, almost swallowed by the storm, but Daniel's trained ears caught it nonetheless. A cry. Human. Female. Desperate. Daniel froze, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air as he strained to listen. There it was again, weaker this time, coming from somewhere below the ridge to his left. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, to get home to Tommy before the storm worsened. But something deeper, something that defined who he was at his core, wouldn't let him take another step toward safety. "Damn it!" he muttered, adjusting the rope of dead rabbits over his shoulder before plunging down the slope toward the sound. The descent was treacherous. Snow gave way beneath his feet, sending him sliding and stumbling through the darkness. Branches whipped at his face, leaving stinging cuts that the cold instantly numbed. But he pressed on, following that thread of human distress like a lifeline in reverse, not pulling him to safety, but drawing him toward danger. He found her at the base of a 15-foot drop, half buried in a snowdrift that had probably saved her life by cushioning her fall. Even in the dim light filtering through the storm clouds, Daniel could see she didn't belong here. Her coat, though torn and dirty, was clearly expensive, the kind of thing he'd seen in store windows during his rare trips to Denver, with price tags that could feed him and Tommy for a year. Her boots were Italian leather, utterly useless in this terrain, and her gloves were more fashion than function. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the unnatural angle of her left leg, the blood seeping through her designer jeans, and the way her lips had turned a dangerous shade of blue. "Ma'am?" Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, his rough hands surprisingly gentle as he brushed snow from her face. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, striking green eyes that seemed to hold entire worlds within them, and focused on him with difficulty. "Help," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Please." "I've got you," Daniel said, already assessing the situation with the practical efficiency of a man who'd learned to make life-and-death decisions quickly. The leg was definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. She had a gash on her forehead that would need stitching, and God knew what internal injuries she might have sustained. Moving her could make things worse, but leaving her here meant certain death. No choice then. "This is going to hurt," he warned, pulling off his jacket despite the cold and wrapping it around her. "But I need to get you somewhere warm or we're both going to freeze to death out here." She nodded weakly, her teeth chattering too violently to speak. Daniel had carried wounded deer out of these mountains. He'd hauled 100-pound loads of firewood on his back. But lifting this woman, trying to be gentle with her injuries while fighting against the storm and the treacherous terrain, was perhaps the hardest physical challenge he'd ever faced. She cried out when he lifted her, the sound cutting through him like a blade. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. "I'm sorry," he grunted, adjusting her weight across his shoulders in a fireman's carry. "Just hold on. It's not far." It was a lie. The cabin was still almost a mile away, and every step felt like 10. The snow had deepened to his thighs in places, and with the added weight of the woman, each movement forward became a monumental effort. His muscles screamed in protest, his lungs burned with each frozen breath, and more than once he stumbled and nearly fell. But Daniel Hayes was nothing if not stubborn. Life had beaten him down more times than he could count, had taken almost everything from him, but it hadn't broken him. Not yet. And he'd be damned if he'd let it break him now. Not when someone's life hung in the balance. "Stay with me," he gasped, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the woman or to himself. "Just stay with me." She murmured something against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. It might have been thank you, or it might have been delirium. Either way, it gave him the strength to push through the last 100 yards. The cabin materialized out of the storm like a miracle. A simple structure of logs and determination that Daniel had built with his own hands 5 years ago, after Maria's death had shattered their previous life into irreparable pieces. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and right now it represented salvation. "Tommy!" Daniel called out as he kicked open the door, nearly collapsing as he crossed the threshold. "Tommy, I need you!" His son appeared from the back room, his young face shifting from relief at his father's return to alarm at the sight of the unconscious woman. Tommy was small for his age, with his mother's dark hair and his father's steady gray eyes, but he'd learned to be older than his years demanded. "Dad, what—" "Get the medical kit," Daniel ordered, carefully lowering the woman onto their worn couch. "And start boiling water. Lots of it." Tommy didn't ask questions. He'd learned that when his father used that tone, immediate action was more important than understanding. As the boy rushed to comply, Daniel began his own frantic preparations. He stoked the fire until it roared, filling the small space with blessed warmth. He grabbed every blanket they owned, all 4 of them, and began carefully removing the woman's wet clothes, trying to preserve her modesty while preventing hypothermia. That's when he saw the full extent of her injuries. Beyond the obvious broken leg and head wound, her torso was covered in bruises that looked too deliberate to be from a fall. Someone had hurt this woman before she'd ended up in that ravine. The thought made something dark and protective stir in Daniel's chest. "Here, Dad." Tommy appeared with the medical kit, a plastic tackle box they'd converted for emergencies, stocked with supplies bought one precious item at a time whenever they could afford it. "Good boy. Now I need you to hold this flashlight steady while I work." For the next 2 hours, Daniel fought to save the stranger's life with the limited resources at his disposal. He cleaned and stitched the head wound with the careful precision of someone who'd learned field medicine out of necessity. He splinted the broken leg using branches he'd been saving for kindling and strips torn from one of their few towels. He treated the cuts and bruises with the antibiotic ointment that he'd been rationing for months. Through it all, Tommy assisted without complaint, his small hands steady as he held the flashlight or passed supplies. The boy had seen enough hardship to understand that sometimes life demanded more from you than you thought you could give. "Is she going to be okay?" Tommy finally asked as Daniel finished wrapping the last bandage. Daniel looked down at the woman, noting with relief that some color had returned to her cheeks. Her breathing was steadier now, deeper. "I think so," he said, allowing himself a moment of exhaustion. "But she's going to need time to heal, and we're going to have to be careful. That leg, if it doesn't set right, she might never walk properly again." "We'll take care of her," Tommy said with the simple certainty of childhood. "Like we took care of that fox with the broken paw, remember?" Daniel smiled despite everything, ruffling his son's hair. "Yeah, buddy, like the fox." Though he suspected this would be considerably more complicated than nursing a wounded animal back to health. As if responding to their voices, the woman's eyes opened again. This time they were clearer, more focused, though pain still clouded their remarkable green depths. "Where?" she began, her voice hoarse. "You're safe," Daniel assured her, moving into her line of sight. You're in my cabin, about 6 miles from Elk Ridge. You had a bad fall. Do you remember what happened?" She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. There was a car. Someone ran me off the road. I tried to get help, but the storm..." She winced as she tried to move. "My leg..." "It's broken," Daniel said gently. "I've set it as best I could, but you're going to need a real doctor. As soon as the storm passes, I'll try to get you to town." "No!" The word came out sharper than she probably intended, and Daniel saw fear flash across her features. "No hospitals, no police, please." Daniel exchanged a glance with Tommy. This was getting more complicated by the minute. "Ma'am, you need proper medical attention. What I've done here is just field dressing. You could have internal injuries, and that leg needs an x-ray at minimum." "I can't," she insisted, trying to sit up before pain forced her back down. "You don't understand. They'll find me. They'll finish what they started." "Who'll find you?" Daniel asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. His life was complicated enough without getting involved in whatever this woman was running from. She closed her eyes, and for a moment Daniel thought she'd passed out again. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Claire. Claire Smith. I was supposed to marry someone powerful. When I said no, when I tried to leave..." She gestured weakly at her injuries. "They made it clear that wasn't an option." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen enough of the world to know that powerful men often thought they owned the women in their lives. The bruises on her torso took on a new, sinister meaning. "No one's going to hurt you here," he said firmly. "I promise you that." She opened her eyes again, studying him as if trying to determine if he was trustworthy. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she relaxed slightly. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Daniel Hayes," he said, "and this is my son, Tommy." "Hi," Tommy said shyly, peering around his father's shoulder. Despite her pain, Claire managed a small smile. "Hi, Tommy. Thank you for helping save me." Tommy beamed, and Daniel felt something shift in his chest. It had been a long time since anyone besides the two of them had been in this cabin. A long time since he'd seen Tommy interact with anyone other than his teacher and classmates during their infrequent trips to town. "You should rest," Daniel said, standing and motioning for Tommy to follow him. "The storm's going to last at least another day, maybe 2. You're safe here until then. After that, we'll figure something out." "I don't want to impose," Claire began, but Daniel cut her off. "Lady, you're not exactly in a position to go anywhere. And I didn't haul you up a mountain in a blizzard just to kick you out now. You'll stay until you're healed enough to travel safely." End of discussion. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or maybe gratitude. People probably didn't talk to her like that often, Daniel figured. Well, she'd have to get used to it. He didn't have time or energy for elaborate manners. Over the next few hours, as the storm raged outside, Daniel and Tommy went about their evening routine with the strange addition of an injured woman on their couch. Daniel prepared dinner, rabbit stew, stretched thin with potatoes and the last of their carrots, while Tommy did his homework by candlelight at the small table. "Do you need help with anything?" Daniel asked, glancing over at his son's worksheets. "It's math," Tommy said with the particular disgust 8-year-olds reserved for their least favorite subjects. "Fractions." "Let me see." Daniel looked over the problems, his own education having ended in 10th grade when his father died, and he'd had to work to support his mother. But he'd learned enough, and what he didn't know, he'd taught himself from Tommy's textbooks. Okay, think of it like this. If we have 1 rabbit and need to make it last 3 days, how much do we eat each day? 1/3? Tommy said hesitantly. Exactly. So 1 divided by 3 equals 1/3. See? You use fractions every day without realizing it. From the couch, Claire watched this interaction with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. When he brought her a bowl of stew, she struggled to sit up. "Let me help," he said, putting the bowl aside and carefully supporting her back as he adjusted the pillows behind her. His hands were gentle despite their calluses, and Claire found herself studying them. Working hands, capable hands, hands that had saved her life. "You're very patient with him," she observed as Daniel handed her the stew. He's a good kid, Daniel said simply. Deserves better than this, but we make do. This? Claire looked around the cabin, taking in details she'd been too injured to notice before. It was small, perhaps 600 square feet total, but scrupulously clean. Everything had its place, from the dishes stacked neatly on handmade shelves to the firewood precisely stacked against one wall. It was poor, yes, but there was dignity in its simplicity. This life, Daniel clarified, living out here, away from everything, it's not what I'd planned for him. What did you plan? Daniel was quiet for so long Claire thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, his mother and I had dreams. A house in town, maybe a little business. She was a teacher, wanted to open a tutoring center. I was going to have a construction company, build homes for families. He shrugged. Cancer doesn't care much about dreams. I'm sorry, Claire said softly. It was 5 years ago. We've adjusted. Daniel's tone suggested the subject was closed. You should eat. You need strength to heal. Claire took a spoonful of the stew, surprised by how good it tasted despite its simplicity. Or maybe because of it. When was the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't prepared by a chef or served in a restaurant where appearances mattered more than flavor? Dad makes the best rabbit stew, Tommy piped up, having apparently conquered his fractions. He can cook anything, deer, elk, fish. One time he made soup from pine needles. Pine needle tea, Daniel corrected. Vitamin C. Keeps scurvy away during long winters. Like pirates, Tommy exclaimed. Exactly like pirates. Daniel agreed with a rare smile that transformed his weathered face, making him look younger, lighter. Claire found herself smiling too, despite the pain radiating from multiple points in her body. There was something here, in this simple cabin with these two people, that she hadn't felt in years. Authenticity, perhaps. Or maybe just the absence of pretense. As the evening wore on, Tommy peppered Claire with questions that his father tried to curtail. Where was she from? Denver, she lied. Did she have any kids? No. What was her favorite color? Green, like the forests. Did she like living in the city? Sometimes. Tommy, let Miss Claire rest, Daniel finally intervened. It's okay, Claire said. I don't mind. It's nice to have the distraction. Tell me about school, she said to Tommy. What's your favorite subject? Science, Tommy said enthusiastically. We're learning about ecosystems. Did you know that everything in nature is connected? Like, if you remove one thing, it affects everything else. Mrs. Patterson says it's like a big web. Your teacher sounds smart, Claire said. She is. She lets me borrow extra books from the library. Dad takes me to town every 2 weeks for school, and I can check out 6 books at a time. Only 6? Claire asked, catching Daniel's eye. Library rules, Daniel explained. Though Mrs. Patterson sometimes sneaks him an extra 1 or 2. The conversation continued, gentle and easy, until Tommy started yawning. Daniel sent him to brush his teeth with water warmed on the stove. No running water in the cabin, Claire realized, and get ready for bed. He sleeps in the loft, Daniel explained, pointing to a ladder that led to a small platform area above. I'll take the floor tonight. You need the couch for your leg. I can't take your... You can, and you will, Daniel said firmly. I've slept on worse than a floor. Trust me. Tommy came to say goodnight, surprising Claire by giving her a gentle hug. I'm glad Dad found you, Kit, he whispered. I hope you feel better tomorrow. After the boy had climbed to his loft, Daniel and Claire sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside and the fire crackle in the hearth. He's wonderful, Claire finally said. You've done an amazing job with him. He's raising himself half the time, Daniel said. I just try to keep him fed and make sure he knows he's loved. That's more than a lot of kids get. Daniel looked at her curiously. Speaking from experience? Claire was quiet for a moment, then said, My parents loved me in their way. They just loved their image more. Every choice I made had to reflect well on them. Every relationship was a potential business alliance. Every achievement was a trophy for their collection. She shifted, wincing at the pain. I guess I finally hit my breaking point. This fiancé of yours. Not my fiancé, Claire corrected quickly. Never my fiancé, whatever he might have told people. Richard Blackstone. His father owns half of Denver's commercial real estate. Our parents have been planning our merger, and yes, they called it that, since we were teenagers. I went along with it for years because it was easier than fighting. Then last month he showed me what our life would really be like. She unconsciously touched one of the bruises on her arm. I said no. He didn't accept that answer. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He'd never hit a woman, never would, couldn't even comprehend the mindset of someone who would. So you ran. I tried to leave properly. Lawyers, restraining orders, the whole thing. But money has a way of making problems disappear. His problems, not mine. The police said without evidence of immediate threat, there was nothing they could do. So yes, I ran, took my car, and drove into the mountains thinking I could hide out in Aspen or Vale until I figured out my next move. Then someone ran me off the road. She laughed bitterly. I guess Richard's reach is longer than I thought. You think he tried to have you killed? I think he tried to have me retrieved. Dead was probably an acceptable alternative if I proved too difficult. She looked at Daniel directly. You saved my life in more ways than one. If they'd found me out there? They didn't, Daniel said simply. And they won't find you here. Nobody knows about this place except Tommy and me, and the occasional ranger. We're completely off the grid. That must be hard, Claire said, looking around again. No electricity, no running water. It's simpler than you'd think, Daniel said. Solar panels charge batteries for essential things. We haul water from the creek, wood stove for heat and cooking, garden in the summer, hunting and trapping in winter. It's work, but it's honest work. And Tommy, is he happy? Daniel considered the question. He doesn't know any different, really. He was 3 when Maria died, barely remembers our life before. This is his normal. And kids adapt, but... He paused, struggling with something. He's smart, really smart. And out here, there's only so much I can teach him. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish, keeping him here. You're keeping him safe, Claire said. You're keeping him loved. That's not selfish. Maybe. Daniel stood, stretching muscles sore from the day's exertions. You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be painful. The second day always is with injuries like yours. I'll leave water and some pain pills within reach. He prepared a makeshift bed on the floor near the fire, layering blankets to create something approaching comfort. Claire watched him work, efficient and uncomplaining, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine admiration for another human being. Daniel? She called softly as he settled onto his improvised bed. Yeah? Thank you. For everything. I know I'm disrupting your life, bringing danger to your door. I'm sorry for that. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then said, My wife used to say that people come into our lives for a reason. Maybe you needed us, but maybe we needed you too. Tommy hasn't smiled that much at dinner in months, so no apologies necessary. As the fire died to embers and the storm continued its assault on the mountain, Claire lay awake despite her exhaustion, thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning she'd been running for her life from a world of wealth and power that had become a prison. Tonight she was lying in a cabin that probably cost less than her monthly gym membership, saved by a man who owned almost nothing but would give everything to help a stranger. She thought about Daniel, about the quiet strength in his movements, the gentle way he'd tended her wounds, the patience with which he'd helped his son with homework. She thought about Tommy, bright and curious despite the hardships of his life. And she thought about herself, who she'd been, who she was expected to be, and who she might become if she survived this. Outside, the wind howled and the snow continued to fall, burying the tracks that might have led her pursuers to this hidden sanctuary. For the first time in months, maybe years, Claire felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. She felt safe. The next morning brought exactly what Daniel had predicted. Pain, and lots of it. Claire woke to find her entire body screaming in protest, every bruise and cut making itself known with vicious intensity. She must have made some sound because suddenly Daniel was there, his face creased with concern. Bad? He asked simply. Rather, she managed through gritted teeth. Tommy, bring the pills and water, Daniel called, then turned back to Claire. We need to check your wounds, make sure there's no infection setting in. With careful efficiency, he examined each injury, his touch clinical but gentle. The head wound was healing cleanly, no signs of infection. The various cuts and bruises were progressing normally, but the leg worried him. "They're swelling," he said, frowning. "More than I'd like. I need to adjust the splint, make sure circulation isn't being cut off." "Do what you need to do," Claire said, bracing herself. It was agony. Even with Daniel's careful hands, every adjustment sent lightning bolts of pain through her leg. Tommy held her hand, his young face serious and supportive, and Claire found herself drawing strength from his presence. "You're being very brave," Tommy told her solemnly. "When I broke my arm falling from a tree, I cried for an hour." "I might cry later," Claire admitted, managing a weak smile. "That's okay. Dad says crying is just your body's way of releasing pressure, like a kettle letting off steam." "Your dad sounds like a wise man." Tommy beamed with pride. "He is. He knows everything about surviving in the mountains. He can track any animal, find water anywhere, and he even knows which plants are medicine." "Speaking of which," Daniel said, finishing with the splint, "I'm going to make you some willow bark tea. It's nature's aspirin. Tastes terrible, but it'll help with the pain and inflammation." He was right on both counts. The tea was possibly the most bitter thing Claire had ever tasted, but within an hour the edge had come off her pain, reducing it from unbearable to merely miserable. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it seemed to be getting worse. Daniel kept the fire roaring, but cold still crept in through every tiny gap in the cabin's construction. He and Tommy went about their daily routines with practiced efficiency: schoolwork, maintenance, food preparation, while Claire dozed fitfully on the couch. Around midday, Tommy approached her shyly with a worn book in his hands. "Would you like me to read to you?" he offered. "Sometimes when I'm sick, Dad reads to me and it helps." Claire was touched by the gesture. "I'd love that." Tommy settled cross-legged on the floor beside the couch and opened the book. A collection of Jack London stories, she saw. His young voice was clear and expressive as he read "To Build a Fire," seemingly oblivious to the irony of reading about a man freezing to death in the wilderness while a blizzard raged outside. Daniel worked nearby, mending what looked like a fishing net, but Claire caught him watching them with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. When Tommy finished the story, Claire applauded softly. "You read very well," she said. "Better than some adults I know." "Dad taught me," Tommy said proudly. "He said reading is the most important skill a person can have because it lets you learn anything you want to know." "He's right," Claire agreed, then had an idea. "What would you like to learn about? If you could learn anything?" Tommy's face lit up. "Everything, but especially about other countries and space and how computers work and history, not just American history, but like ancient Egypt and Rome and China and—" "Slow down there, buddy," Daniel said with a chuckle. Miss Claire asked for one thing, not an encyclopedia. But Claire was smiling. "I think curiosity about everything is wonderful. Never lose that, Tommy." The afternoon passed quietly. Daniel made lunch, a simple meal of canned soup and homemade bread that Claire found surprisingly satisfying. She'd eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants around the world, but there was something about this basic food, prepared with care and shared without pretense, that filled more than just her stomach. As evening approached, Daniel grew increasingly concerned about their supplies. The storm had already lasted longer than expected, and with an extra mouth to feed, their food would run out faster. "I need to check the emergency cache," he told Claire. "I keep supplies in a sealed container about 100 yards from here. Tommy, you stay with Miss Claire." "Be careful," Claire said, surprised by how much she meant it. Daniel bundled up and disappeared into the white void beyond the door. Tommy immediately took up a position by the window, his face anxious as he watched for his father's return. "He always comes back," the boy said, though Claire wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. "How long have you lived here, just the two of you?" Claire asked, hoping to distract him. "Since I was 3, after Mama went to heaven." Tommy's voice was matter-of-fact, but Claire heard the old sadness underneath. "Dad built this whole cabin himself. He said we needed a place where we could heal." "And have you? Healed?" Tommy considered this seriously. "I think so. Dad still gets sad sometimes, especially on Mama's birthday. But mostly we're okay. We take care of each other." "That's beautiful," Claire said softly. Do you have someone to take care of you? Tommy asked with the directness of childhood. Claire was saved from answering by Daniel's return. He burst through the door in a cloud of snow, carrying a large plastic container. Getting worse out there, he said, shaking off the snow. We might be stuck here for a week at this rate. A week. Claire tried not to panic. A week meant Richard would have more time to search for her. A week meant the trail would go cold, but it also meant she'd be trapped if they somehow found this place. Daniel seemed to sense her fear. We're invisible in this storm, he assured her. No one's getting up this mountain until it clears, and by then any tracks will be long gone. That night, as they ate dinner, rice and beans with the last of the fresh vegetables, the atmosphere was different. The three of them had settled into a rhythm, like a song finding its melody. Tommy told stories from school, Daniel shared wilderness knowledge, and Claire found herself opening up about travels she'd taken, carefully editing out any details that might reveal her true identity. You've been to Paris? Tommy asked, eyes wide with wonder. Several times, Claire said. The Eiffel Tower is even more magnificent in person than in pictures. What's the food like? Delicious, but honestly, Claire smiled conspiratorially. Your dad's rabbit stew could compete with some of those fancy French restaurants. Tommy giggled while Daniel shook his head, but Claire caught the pleased look in his eyes. As bedtime approached, Tommy surprised them both by asking, Miss Claire, do you know any bedtime stories? Dad always tells the same ones. Hey! Daniel protested with mock indignation. Well, you do, Tommy said. I've heard about the three bears at least 1,000,000 times. Claire laughed, then winced as it jostled her injuries. I might know one or two stories. How about the legend of the Snow Princess? Is it a real legend? Tommy asked, already climbing the ladder to his loft. It is now, Claire said, and began spinning a tale of a princess who lived in a crystal palace high in the mountains, who was kind and brave but very lonely. Until one day, a woodcutter and his son found her and showed her that real wealth wasn't in gold or jewels, but in friendship and love. By the time she finished, Tommy was asleep, and Daniel was looking at her with that unreadable expression again. That was a beautiful story, he said quietly. I've always believed the best stories are the ones that could be true, Claire replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the storm and the fire. Finally, Daniel spoke. You're not really Claire Smith from Denver, are you? Claire's heart stopped. What makes you say that? Your hands, for one thing, they're manicured under those injuries. That coat you were wearing costs more than I make in a year. I've seen them in catalogs. And the way you carry yourself, even injured, you're used to a very different life than the one you described. Claire was quiet for a long moment, considering her options. Would it matter if I wasn't who I said I was? Depends on whether you're running from the law or just from trouble. Just trouble. I swear I haven't committed any crimes, unless you count refusing to marry someone my parents chose. Daniel nodded slowly. Then it doesn't matter. Everyone's entitled to their secrets and their chance to start over. Just like that. Just like that. You're hurt, you need help, and you're not a danger to my son. Everything else is your business. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had accepted her without wanting to know about her money, her connections, her potential value to them? Thank you, she whispered. Get some rest, Daniel said, settling onto his floor bed. Tomorrow we'll try to figure out your next move when the storm passes. But as Claire lay in the darkness, listening to the wind howl and the fire crackle, she found herself in no hurry for the storm to pass. For the first time in her adult life, she was nobody special. Just Claire, injured woman taken in by kind strangers. No expectations, no obligations, no one trying to use her or control her. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. The third day brought a break in the storm's fury, though snow still fell steadily. Daniel stood by the window, studying the sky with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read weather like scripture. Claire watched him from the couch, noting the way morning light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, the way his shoulders carried responsibility like a familiar weight. Might clear by tomorrow, he said finally. Maybe the day after. Claire's stomach tightened. Part of her wanted to leave, to stop endangering these good people. But another part, a part she didn't want to examine too closely, dreaded returning to the world beyond this cabin. I should probably figure out where to go, she said carefully. Daniel turned from the window. You're not going anywhere on that leg for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3, unless you want to risk permanent damage. I can't impose on you for that long. Why not? Tommy asked from his spot at the table where he was doing math problems. We have room, and you're nice. Tommy, Daniel started, but the boy continued. She is, and she tells better stories than you do, Dad. No offense. Daniel's lips twitched. None taken, traitor. Claire laughed, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through her ribs. Daniel was beside her instantly, his hand gentle on her shoulder. Easy. Those ribs are probably cracked. Laughing's gonna hurt for a while. Everything hurts, Claire admitted. That's actually a good sign, Daniel said. Means you're healing. It's when you stop feeling pain that you need to worry. His hand was still on her shoulder, warm and steady, and Claire found herself leaning into the touch before catching herself. Daniel seemed to realize it too, pulling back with a slight awkwardness that was oddly endearing. I need to check the generator, he said abruptly. Tommy, help Miss Claire if she needs anything. After he left, Tommy abandoned his math to sit near Claire. Dad likes you, he announced. I'm sure he's just being kind. No, he likes you, Tommy insisted. He made you the good blanket, and he never gives anyone the good blanket. And he smiled 3 times yesterday. He usually only smiles once a day, maybe twice if something really funny happens. Claire didn't know what to say to that, so she changed the subject. How's your math coming? Tommy made a face. Terrible. I hate word problems. Why can't they just say, multiply this by that, instead of talking about trains and apples and stuff? Want some help? For the next hour, Claire worked with Tommy on his math, finding creative ways to explain concepts that made sense to his 8-year-old mind. When Daniel returned, covered in snow and grease from the generator, he found them both laughing over a particularly ridiculous word problem involving a farmer, his chickens, and an improbable number of eggs. Do I want to know? He asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Miss Claire says math teachers must be really bad at shopping because they never know how many apples they're buying, Tommy giggled. If Johnny has 15 apples and gives away 7, any normal person would just say he has 8 left, Claire explained. But math teachers have to make it complicated. Daniel chuckled, a warm sound that filled the small cabin. Well, I'm glad someone can make math fun. Usually, it's like pulling teeth to get him through homework. Miss Claire's really smart, Dad. She knows about everything. Not everything, Claire protested, but she was pleased by the boy's enthusiasm. Daniel started preparing lunch, and Claire insisted on helping despite her injuries. He settled her at the table with vegetables to chop, slowly and carefully, while he worked on the meat. You don't have to do this, he said. I want to. I feel useless just lying there. You're healing. That's not useless. Still. She carefully diced a carrot, aware of him watching her. I'm not used to being idle. What are you used to? He asked carefully. Claire considered her answer. Meetings, schedules, every minute planned and accounted for, charity galas where everyone pretends to care about causes they'll forget by morning, business dinners where the food is secondary to the deals being made. She paused. I haven't chopped a vegetable in years. We had staff for that. Daniel didn't comment on the we or the staff, just nodded and continued working. Do you miss it? I thought I would, Claire admitted. But sitting here, doing something simple and real, I feel more useful than I have in years. Daddy says honest work is the best work, Tommy piped up from where he was reading, even if it doesn't pay much. Your daddy's right, Claire said, catching Daniel's eye. Something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or recognition. That afternoon, while Tommy napped and Daniel worked on repairing some tools, Claire found herself talking about her real life, carefully avoiding specific names and details that might identify her. My father built his empire from nothing, she said. He was proud of that, rightly so. But somewhere along the way, he forgot what it was like to have nothing. Money became the only measure of success. My mother, she lost herself in maintaining appearances. The perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect family. Except we weren't perfect. We were hollow. Daniel listened without interrupting, his hands steady on his work. I had everything, Claire continued. The best education, designer clothes, luxury vacations. But I also had a schedule planned from the moment I woke up. Piano lessons, not because I loved music, but because it was expected. Equestrian training, not for the joy of riding, but because it was good for networking. Even my friendships were orchestrated, the right families, the right connections. That's no way to live, Daniel said quietly. I didn't know any different until recently. It took someone putting their hands on me in anger for me to realize I'd been accepting a different kind of violence my whole life. The violence of having no choices, no real freedom. Is that when you ran? After the third time. The first time I made excuses. He was drunk, stressed about a business deal. The second time I blamed myself. Maybe I had been too confrontational. The third time, she touched her ribs gingerly. The third time I finally saw clearly. He wasn't going to change. My parents weren't going to protect me. The life they'd planned for me was a prison with golden bars. Daniel set down his tools and looked at her directly. You're brave, he said simply. Leaving everything you know, everything comfortable and safe. That takes courage. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. That evening, as snow began falling harder again, they received an unexpected visitor. A knock at the door made them all freeze. They never had visitors, especially not in weather like this. Daniel grabbed his rifle, motioning for Tommy to stay back. Who is it? Dan, it's Jim Morrison, Ranger Station. Daniel relaxed slightly, though he kept the rifle handy as he opened the door. A man in his 60s stood there, wrapped in winter ranger gear, snow coating his shoulders. Jim, what the hell are you doing out in this? Making rounds, checking on folks. Storm's supposed to get worse before it gets better. Wanted to make sure you and Tommy were all right. His eyes found Claire on the couch, and his eyebrows rose. Daniel stepped aside to let him in. This is Claire, Daniel said simply. Found her at the bottom of Devil's Drop 3 days ago, injured. Jim's expression turned serious. That's a bad spot. You're lucky Dan found you, miss. Not many would have survived a fall like that in this weather. I'm very grateful, Claire said carefully, unsure how much to reveal. Jim studied her for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. There's been some folks asking around town about a missing woman. Rich folks, by the look of them, offering a substantial reward. Claire's blood ran cold. Daniel stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between her and Jim. That's so. Daniel's voice was neutral. Said she was mentally unstable, needed medication. Dangerous to herself. Jim's weathered face was unreadable. Of course, I haven't seen anyone like that. Just checking on local folks, making sure everyone's surviving the storm. The message was clear. Jim knew exactly who Claire was, and he was choosing not to know. We're doing fine, Daniel said. Got enough supplies to last. Good, good. Jim pulled out a small bag. Brought some extra medical supplies just in case. Antibiotics, proper pain medication. You know, for emergencies. Daniel accepted the bag with a nod of thanks. I'll be heading back now, Jim said. Probably won't make it up here again for a week or two, what with the storm and all. You folks take care. After he left, the cabin was silent for a long moment. He knows, Claire whispered. Jim's good people, Daniel said. He won't say anything. Why? There's probably a huge reward because Jim Morrison spent 30 years as a Chicago cop before coming here. He knows the difference between someone running from justice and someone running from injustice. And because out here, we take care of our own. But I'm not. You are now, Daniel said firmly. You're under my roof, eating at my table. That makes you ours to protect. Claire felt tears well up. I don't understand you people. Nothing to understand, Tommy said, looking up from his book. It's just what's right. The simple certainty in the boy's voice broke something in Claire. The tears came then, real tears, not the polite decorative tears she'd been taught were acceptable, but raw, ugly sobs that shook her injured body. Daniel didn't try to comfort her with platitudes. He simply sat beside her, solid and present, while Tommy climbed up carefully to hold her hand. It's okay to cry, Tommy whispered. Dad says tears wash the soul clean. When the storm of emotion passed, Claire felt emptied, but somehow lighter. Daniel brought her water and one of Jim's pain pills. Thank you, she said, meaning more than just the water. Rest now, he said gently. We'll figure out the rest later. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The pain was manageable, but her mind raced with possibilities and fears. She heard Daniel moving quietly in the darkness, adding wood to the fire, and called out softly. "Can't sleep either?" He came to sit in the chair near the couch. "Storm's got me restless. Always does." "Tell me about Maria," Claire said impulsively. "If you don't mind." Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice soft in the darkness. "She was sunshine," he said simply. "Even in the hardest times, she found something to smile about. We met in high school. She was the smart one, headed for college, while I was just trying to graduate and find work. No one understood what she saw in me." "What did she see?" "She said I was the only person who saw her, not just her achievements. Everyone else saw the valedictorian, the full scholarship recipient, the girl going places. I just saw Maria, who laughed at bad jokes and cried at dog food commercials and ate pizza with a fork." Claire smiled in the darkness. "We got married right after she graduated college. Everyone said we were too young, too different, but we knew. You know when you know, you know?" "I wouldn't know," Claire said softly. "I've never had that." "We had 8 good years," Daniel continued. "Struggled financially, sure, but we were happy. Then Tommy came along and life felt complete. Maria quit teaching to stay home with him, said he was more important than any career. We were planning for more kids, planning a whole life. And then the cancer. Pancreatic. By the time they found it, it was too late. 4 months from diagnosis to..." He trailed off. "She spent the last month making sure Tommy and I would be okay. Made me promise to keep living, not just surviving. I'm not sure I've kept that promise." "You have," Claire said firmly. "You're raising an amazing son. You saved my life. You're living." "Maybe," Daniel shifted in the chair. "What about you? Ever been in love? Real love, not the arranged kind?" "I thought I was once. In college. He was an art student, passionate about everything, completely inappropriate by my parents' standards. We had 6 months before my father found out and ended it." "Ended it how?" "The boy's scholarship disappeared. His family suddenly faced an IRS audit. His father lost his job." Claire's voice was bitter. The message was clear. Stay away from me or be destroyed. He chose survival. I don't blame him. "That's cruel." "That's power," Claire corrected. "My father would say he was protecting me from a fortune hunter, but Thomas wasn't after money. He just loved me, or I thought he did." "Maybe love can't survive that kind of pressure." "Real love can survive anything," Daniel said with quiet conviction. "But both people have to be willing to fight for it." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the storm. Finally, Daniel stood. "You should try to sleep. Healing takes energy." "Daniel?" Claire called as he moved back to his makeshift bed. "Yeah? What you have here with Tommy, this life, it's not less than what you planned. It's just different, and it's beautiful." She heard him pause in the darkness, then his quiet "thank you," before he settled down. The next morning brought sun for the first time in days, though snow still covered everything in a thick blanket. Daniel was up early checking the damage from the storm, while Tommy made breakfast, oatmeal with dried berries and a precious drizzle of honey. "You're getting good at this," Claire told him as he carefully carried her bowl to the couch. "Dad says everyone should know how to cook. He says it's a survival skill and an act of love." "Your dad says a lot of wise things." "He reads a lot," Tommy explained. "Every night after I go to bed. He says books are windows to other worlds." Claire thought about the man she'd observed over the past few days. Rough-handed, weather-worn, living in poverty by any standard. And yet he was one of the most philosophical, well-spoken people she'd met. It was a reminder that wisdom had nothing to do with wealth or formal education. Daniel returned, shaking snow from his coat. "Good news and bad news." "Good news. Storm's definitely breaking. Should be clear in a day or two. Bad news. There's been some activity down the mountain. Saw smoke from campfires where there shouldn't be any." Claire's stomach dropped. "They're searching for me." "Maybe, or could be hikers who got caught in the storm. Either way, we need to be careful." "I should leave. I'm putting you both in danger." "You're not going anywhere on that leg," Daniel said firmly. "Besides, trying to move you now would draw more attention. We stick to the plan. You heal, Then we figure out safe passage. But if they come here, then they'll find a father and son who haven't seen anyone. Daniel's jaw set stubbornly. I told you, you're under my protection now. That means something here. That afternoon, while Tommy was absorbed in a book, Daniel taught Claire basic wilderness survival skills to keep her mind off the danger. Fire is your first priority, he explained, showing her how to build one properly. Shelter second, water third, food last. You can survive weeks without food, days without water, but only hours without warmth in weather like this. How do you know all this? Grew up in rural Montana. My dad was a hunting guide before the accident that killed him. Taught me everything about living off the land. Never thought I'd need it for actual survival, just figured it was good knowledge to have. And now you're living it. Life has a way of circling back, Daniel agreed. Skills you learn for fun become necessities. Things you take for granted become luxuries. He taught her how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to find water even in winter, which plants were edible and which were medicinal. Claire found herself fascinated, not just by the knowledge but by the way he taught, patient, thorough, making sure she understood not just the what, but the why. You're a natural teacher, she said. Maria always said that. Said I should get my teaching certificate, work at the school. But, he shrugged, that requires college, and college requires money we never had. You could still do it. Maybe someday, when Tommy's older. Right now, keeping us fed and safe is enough. That evening, they heard the distant sound of helicopters. Daniel immediately doused the lanterns, letting only the fire provide light. They sat in tense silence, listening as the sound grew closer, then gradually faded. Search and rescue, maybe, Daniel said, though he didn't sound convinced. Claire knew better. Richard had access to private helicopters, and he wouldn't hesitate to use them. The search was intensifying. I need to leave tomorrow, she said. I can't let them find you harboring me. With a broken leg and cracked ribs? You wouldn't make it a mile. Then I'll turn myself in. Say I got lost, that I've been alone. Stop. Daniel's voice was sharp. Just stop. You're not sacrificing yourself, and you're not running off half-cocked. We're going to be smart about this. Why do you care so much? Claire asked, frustrated. You don't even know me, the real me. I know enough, Daniel said quietly. I know you're kind to my son. I know you're brave enough to leave everything rather than accept abuse. I know you work to earn your keep even when you're in pain. I know you're worth protecting. The simple certainty in his voice undid her. I'm not worth the risk to you and Tommy. That's not your decision to make, Daniel said. It's mine. And I've made it. Tommy looked up from his book. We're family now, he said matter-of-factly. Family protects each other. We're not, Claire began. Sure we are, Tommy interrupted. Not the blood kind, but the chosen kind. Dad says chosen family is sometimes stronger because you pick each other on purpose. Claire looked between them, this father and son who had nothing but gave everything, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Okay, she whispered. Okay. That night, Daniel stayed up keeping watch while Claire and Tommy slept. She woke once to find him standing by the window, rifle nearby but not in hand, silhouetted against the moonlight on snow. He looked like something out of a frontier painting, solid, dependable, ready to defend what was his. What was his? When had she started thinking of herself as belonging here? Belonging with them? It was dangerous thinking, she knew. This was temporary. It had to be. But as she drifted back to sleep, listening to Tommy's soft breathing from the loft and watching Daniel keep his silent vigil, she allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that this could be real, that she could stay, that she could choose this life of honest work and simple pleasures and chosen family. The next morning brought visitors, not the ones Claire feared, but almost as concerning. A family from down the mountain, the Petersons, arrived on snowmobiles with their teenage daughter. Dan! Robert Peterson called out, checking on everyone after the storm. You folks okay? Daniel stepped outside to greet them, leaving Claire hidden inside. But Mrs. Peterson had other ideas, bustling past him with the determined energy of a born caretaker. Don't be silly, Daniel Hayes. I brought soup and bread, and I'm not leaving until I know you and Tommy are properly fed. Oh! She stopped short, seeing Claire on the couch. This is Claire, Daniel said quickly. She had an accident in the storm. Mrs. Peterson's sharp eyes took in Claire's injuries, the makeshift splint, the careful way she held herself. Good Lord, dear, you need a hospital. I'm fine, Claire said carefully. Daniel's been taking wonderful care of me. I'm sure he has, but... Mom, the teenage daughter, Sarah, interrupted. Leave them alone. If she needed a hospital, Mr. Hayes would have gotten her there. Claire saw the girl exchange a look with Daniel. Apparently this wasn't the first time the Petersons had tried to interfere in his life. Well, at least let me leave the food, Mrs. Peterson said, though she kept glancing at Claire with curious eyes. And Sarah has Tommy's homework from Mrs. Patterson. Tommy, Daniel called. Sarah's here. Tommy came running, excited to see his friend. The two children immediately began chattering about school and the storm while Mrs. Peterson unpacked enough food for a week. This is very kind, Claire said. Thank you. It's what neighbors do, Mrs. Peterson replied, though her tone suggested she had opinions about Daniel having a woman in his cabin. How long have you known Daniel? Mom, Sarah protested. God, you're so nosy. I'm just being friendly. You're being embarrassing, Robert Peterson said, appearing in the doorway. Come on, Linda. We've got 3 more families to check on. After they left, Tommy was bouncing with excitement. Sarah said school might be closed for another week, and she brought my library books. That was nice of her, Daniel said, though Claire could see the tension in his shoulders. The Petersons would talk. In a small mountain community, gossip traveled faster than avalanches. I'm causing you problems, Claire said. Nothing I can't handle. Besides, Linda Peterson's been trying to set me up with every single woman in 3 counties since Maria died. This will give her something new to focus on. Dad, are you going to marry Miss Claire? Tommy asked innocently. Daniel choked on his coffee while Claire felt her face burn. Tommy, you can't just ask. Why not? Sarah's mom says you need a wife, and I need a mom, and Miss Claire is nice and pretty, and she doesn't mind that we're poor. Thomas James Hayes, Daniel said firmly. Miss Claire is our guest, and she'll be leaving once she's healed. You can't go planning people's lives for them. But, no buts. Now go read your library books. Tommy sulked off to the loft, leaving Daniel and Claire in awkward silence. I'm sorry, Daniel finally said. He doesn't understand boundaries sometimes. It's fine, Claire said, though her heart was racing. He's just a child. Yeah, but... Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. I don't, Claire said honestly. If anything, I feel more comfortable here than I have anywhere in years. Their eyes met and held for a moment before Daniel looked away. I should check the generator again, he said quickly, grabbing his coat. After he left, Claire lay back and stared at the ceiling. What was she doing? She couldn't stay here. Even if Richard wasn't hunting her, even if she could disappear completely, she couldn't insert herself into this small, perfect family. They deserved better than a woman with a target on her back and a fortune that would destroy their simple life. But God, how she wanted to stay. That afternoon, while Daniel was outside and Tommy was reading, Claire carefully made her way to the small mirror hanging near the door. She hadn't looked at herself since the accident, and the reflection was shocking. Her face was still swollen and bruised, though the colors were fading from purple to green-yellow. The gash on her forehead would leave a scar. Her usually perfectly styled hair hung limp and tangled. She looked nothing like Claire Whitmore, billionaire heiress. She looked like a survivor. You're still pretty, Tommy said, making her jump. She hadn't heard him climb down from the loft. That's sweet of you to say. It's true. Dad thinks so too. He looks at you when you're not watching. Tommy, I know. You're leaving when you're better. But maybe you could visit sometimes? Or we could visit you. Claire's heart broke a little. It's complicated, sweetheart. Adults always say that when they mean no, Tommy said sadly. Before Claire could respond, Daniel burst through the door. We've got company coming, not friendly. Claire's blood went cold as she heard the sound of engines approaching. Tommy, loft, now, stay silent. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. Claire, can you move? Yes. Good. Back room, in the closet. There's a false back. Push hard and it'll open to a small space. Get in there and don't make a sound. Claire didn't argue. Adrenaline masked the pain as she hobbled to the back room, found the closet, and pushed through the false panel into a space barely big enough for one person. She pulled it closed just as she heard vehicles arrive outside. Through the thin walls, she could hear everything. "Mr. Hayes?" An unfamiliar voice, cultured and cold. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm looking for someone who may have gotten lost in the storm." "Haven't seen anyone." Daniel's voice was steady. "Been hunkered down here with my boy." "I see. You wouldn't mind if we looked around? We're very concerned about this person. She's not well, needs medication." "You got a warrant?" "I'm not law enforcement, Mr. Hayes. I'm merely a concerned friend." "Then I'm merely declining your request," Daniel said. "This is private property." There was a pause, then Webb's voice turned harder. "Mr. Hayes, I don't think you understand the situation. The woman we're looking for is dangerous. She's had a psychotic break. She may seem rational, but she's very ill. There's a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return." "How substantial?" Daniel asked, and Claire's heart sank. $50,000. Claire held her breath. 50,000 would change Daniel and Tommy's life. It would mean proper heating, running water, education for Tommy, medical care, everything they needed. "That's a lot of money," Daniel said slowly. "It is, and all you have to do is tell me if you've seen a woman, 30s, dark hair, green eyes, injured. Her name is Claire Whitmore." The silence stretched forever. "Sorry," Daniel finally said. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description. Now, unless you're planning to offer me more than money to violate my privacy, I'd like you to leave." "Mr. Hayes, you should know that harboring a fugitive—" "She's not a fugitive if she's not wanted by the law," Daniel interrupted. "And you already said you're not law enforcement. So what you're really saying is that you want me to help you kidnap a woman who clearly doesn't want to be found. That about right?" Webb's voice turned icy. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," Daniel replied. "I'm asking you politely to leave. I won't ask twice." There was another long pause, then the sound of car doors slamming and engines starting. Claire didn't move until Daniel opened the false panel. "They're gone," he said, helping her out. "But they'll be back." $50,000, Claire said weakly. "Not enough," Daniel replied. "Not enough. Daniel, that would change everything for you." "No amount of money is worth betraying someone under my protection," Daniel said firmly. "Money can be earned. Integrity, once lost, can't be recovered." Tommy appeared at the doorway. "Plus, we like you better than money," he added. Claire laughed through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You two are impossible." "Dad says impossible is just another word for haven't figured it out yet," Tommy said proudly. That night, they made plans. The men would return, probably with law enforcement next time. Some trumped-up charge that would give them the right to search. Claire needed to be gone before then. "Jim mentioned an old ranger station about 10 miles north," Daniel said, studying a hand-drawn map. "It's been abandoned for years, but it's still solid. You could hide there while we figure out the next step." "You can't get involved anymore," Claire protested. "They know you now. They'll watch you." "Let them watch. They'll see a man and his son living their normal life, while you're secretly helping me." "Wouldn't be the first time I've helped someone disappear," Daniel said quietly. At Claire's shocked look, he explained, "Few years back, a woman and her kids came through, running from an abusive husband. Jim and I helped them get to Canada, new identities, new life. Sometimes the law and what's right aren't the same thing. You could lose Tommy if you're caught." "I could lose him if I teach him to abandon people in need," Daniel countered. "What kind of man would he become if he learned that money matters more than doing what's right?" The next day, they prepared for Claire's departure. Daniel fashioned a better splint for her leg and gathered supplies she'd need. Tommy insisted on giving her his favorite book, the Jack London collection. "So you don't get lonely," he said. "I'll treasure it," Claire promised, hugging him carefully. As darkness fell, Daniel prepared to move her to the ranger station. But first, Claire had something to say. "My name is Claire Whitmore," she said quietly. "My family owns Whitmore Industries. We're worth about $3 billion. Daniel's expression didn't change. "Okay." "Okay? That's all?" "Changes nothing. You're still Claire who helped Tommy with his math and made him laugh. Money's just numbers in a bank. Most people would. I'm not most people, Daniel said simply. Neither are you, or you wouldn't have run from that life. The journey to the abandoned ranger station was excruciating. Every bump and jostle of the makeshift sled Daniel had rigged sent lightning bolts of pain through Claire's injured body. He'd wrapped her in blankets and secured her carefully, but 10 miles through rough terrain in the dark was torture no matter how gentle he tried to be. Almost there, Daniel said for the third time, though Claire suspected he was trying to convince himself as much as her. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and he was navigating by memory and instinct alone. When they finally arrived, Claire could barely make out the structure in the darkness. A small wooden building that looked like it had been fighting a losing battle with the elements for years. Daniel carried her inside, his breathing labored from the effort of pulling the sled through deep snow. "It's not much," he said, lighting a lantern he'd brought. The yellow glow revealed a single room with a rusted stove, a broken window patched with plywood, and a cot that had seen better decades. "It's perfect," Claire said, meaning it. It was shelter, it was hidden, and most importantly, it was far from Daniel and Tommy's cabin. Daniel worked quickly to make the space livable. He'd brought firewood, enough food for a week, medical supplies, and several jugs of water. He got the old stove working, patched the worst of the gaps in the walls with the tarp he'd brought, and set up the cot with the blankets from his own bed. "I'll come back tomorrow night," he said. "Bring more supplies, check on your injuries." "You shouldn't. They'll be watching you." "Let them. I'll be careful." He paused at the door. "There's a rifle under the cot. It's loaded. You know how to use it? Point and shoot? Close enough. Safety's here. Only use it if you have no other choice." He looked at her for a long moment. "You sure about this?" "No," Claire admitted. "But it's the right thing to do." After he left, Claire sat in the flickering lantern light, truly alone for the first time since her fall. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the wind whistling through gaps in the walls and the pop of wood in the stove. She pulled out Tommy's book, running her fingers over the worn cover. Inside, in careful child's handwriting, was written, "Property of Tommy Hayes. If found, please return. This book is my friend." She opened to a random page and began reading by lantern light, trying not to think about how much she already missed them. Back at the cabin, Daniel found Tommy waiting up for him. "Is she okay?" the boy asked immediately. "She's safe," Daniel said, pulling his son into a hug. "That's what matters." "I don't understand why she had to leave." "Sometimes, buddy, protecting someone means letting them go." "But what if she needs us?" "Then we'll be there," Daniel promised. No matter what. The next morning brought exactly what Daniel had expected. Marcus Webb returned, this time with the sheriff. Daniel saw them coming and sent Tommy to the loft with strict instructions to stay quiet. "Mr. Hayes," Sheriff Coleman said apologetically. He was a good man who'd known Daniel since he'd moved to the mountain. "I'm sorry about this, but Mr. Webb here has filed a missing person report. I need to search your property." "You have a warrant?" Coleman held up the paper. "Judge signed it this morning. I tried to fight it, Dan, but Webb's got lawyers making noise about obstruction." Daniel stepped aside. "Do what you need to do, Tom." The search was thorough but respectful. Coleman's doing, not Webb's. The sheriff made sure nothing was damaged, nothing disturbed beyond necessity. Webb prowled behind him like a wolf scenting prey, his expensive suit looking absurd in the rustic cabin. "Check the loft," Webb ordered. "I'll check everything," Coleman said mildly. "That's my job." Tommy sat on his bed in the loft, book in hand, the picture of innocence. He looked up when the sheriff climbed the ladder. "Hi, Sheriff Coleman." "Hey, Tommy, just need to look around a bit, okay?" "Are you looking for the lady?" Tommy asked with childlike directness. Webb's head snapped up. "What lady?" Tommy looked confused. "The one on the missing posters Dad saw in town last week. The one with the weird hair." "That was a lost hiker from last month, buddy," Daniel said smoothly. "Different person." Coleman finished his search and climbed down. "Nothing here, Webb, like the man said." Webb turned on Daniel. "You're lying. I know she was here." "Prove it," Daniel said simply. Webb's face darkened. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Claire Whitmore is disturbed. She needs help. If she's so disturbed, why isn't her family here looking for her? Daniel asked. Why send a hired gun? I represent the family's interests. You represent Richard Blackstone's interests, Daniel interrupted. I may live on a mountain, but I'm not stupid. I know how to use the internet when I go to town. Claire Whitmore's been in the society pages for years. Funny how she suddenly developed mental illness right when she refused to marry Blackstone's son. Sheriff Coleman's eyebrows rose. That true, Webb? The family situation is complicated. Sounds pretty simple to me, Coleman said. Woman doesn't want to get married, so you're hunting her down. That about right? She's sick. Then get a doctor's statement. Get her family to file the report themselves. Until then, stop wasting my time. Coleman turned to Daniel. Sorry about the intrusion, Dan. After they left, Tommy scrambled down from the loft. Did I do good? You did perfect, Daniel said, ruffling his hair. But remember, lying is wrong except when telling the truth would hurt innocent people, Tommy finished. I know, Dad. That night, Daniel made his way to the ranger station, taking a circuitous route in case he was being followed. He found Claire fevered and shaking, her injuries infected despite their best efforts. Hey, she said weakly when he entered. Fancy seeing you here. Daniel's heart clenched at the sight of her. He immediately went into caretaker mode, checking her temperature, examining her wounds. The head gash was red and angry-looking, and her leg was swollen. You need antibiotics, he said. The ones Jim brought aren't strong enough. You need a doctor, Claire. No doctors. They'll find me. Then you'll die, Daniel said bluntly. Infection setting in. Another day or two without proper treatment. Then I die, Claire said with a weak smile. Better than going back. Don't say that. Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. Don't you dare give up. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. There's someone who might help, Doc Harmon. He lost his license years ago for prescribing pain meds to people who actually needed them, instead of following bureaucratic rules. He lives about 20 miles north, completely off the grid. Can you trust him? Saved Tommy's life when he had pneumonia 2 years ago. Yeah, I trust him. But bringing him here, I'll blindfold him for the last part. He won't ask questions. Daniel stood. I'll be back before dawn. Daniel, wait. Claire caught his hand. Why are you doing this? Really? He looked down at their joined hands, his rough and calloused, hers soft despite the recent hardships. Because you matter, he said simply. To Tommy, to me, you matter. Before she could respond, he was gone. The next hours were a haze of fever dreams for Claire. She saw Richard's face morphing into her father's, both telling her she was worthless without them. She saw her mother, cold and perfect, explaining that love was just another transaction. She saw Tommy crying because she'd left, Daniel turning away in disgust when he learned who she really was. When she woke, there was an old man with kind eyes and steady hands examining her injuries. Well, he said in a gravelly voice, you've certainly done a number on yourself, young lady. Are you Doc Harmon? I am, and you're lucky Daniel found me when he did. Another day and sepsis would have set in. He pulled supplies from his bag. This is going to hurt, but it'll save your life. The next hour was agony as he cleaned and properly treated her wounds, set up an IV for antibiotics, and resplinted her leg. Daniel held her hand throughout, his presence the only thing keeping her grounded. She needs at least 3 days of IV antibiotics, Doc told Daniel. I'll leave enough, show you how to change the bags. The fever should break within 24 hours. If it doesn't, you'll need to get her to a hospital. Consequences be damned. Understood. Doc packed his things, then paused. Daniel, I don't know who she is and I don't want to know. But whoever's after her has serious resources. There's been men in town asking questions, throwing money around. Let them ask. Just be careful. That boy of yours needs his father. After Doc left, Daniel settled in beside Claire's cot. She was sleeping more peacefully now, the antibiotics already beginning their work. He studied her face in the lantern light. Even bruised and battered, she was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was strength in the set of her jaw, kindness in the lines around her eyes, courage in the way she'd chosen freedom over comfort. He was in trouble, and he knew it. Somewhere between finding her in the snow and now, she'd become essential to him in a way he hadn't thought possible since Maria. It wasn't the same, nothing could be, but it was real and powerful and terrifying. Claire stirred, her eyes opening to find him watching her. "You're still here," she murmured. "Where else would I be?" "With Tommy, being safe, being smart. Tommy's with the Petersons tonight. Told them I had to help Jim with something at the ranger station." He squeezed her hand. "And I've never been accused of being smart." "Liar. You're one of the smartest men I've ever met." "Book smart and life smart are different things." "You're both." She shifted, wincing. "How bad is it? The infection?" "Doc says you'll be fine. Just need rest and antibiotics." "And then what? I can't stay here forever." "We'll figure it out," Daniel said. "One day at a time." Over the next 3 days, Daniel split his time between caring for Claire and maintaining normalcy at home. He'd leave before dawn to check on her, changing IV bags and bringing supplies, then return to get Tommy ready for school. In the evenings, after Tommy was asleep, he'd make the trek again. Claire improved steadily. The fever broke after 36 hours, and the infection began to retreat. On the third night, she was well enough to argue. "You have to stop coming here," she said as Daniel prepared soup on the old stove. "They're watching you." "I'm careful." "It's not worth the risk." "You're worth the risk," Daniel said without thinking, then froze. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "Daniel," Claire said softly, "we can't." "I know." "I'm leaving as soon as I can walk." "I know. This, whatever this is, it can't happen." "I know." He turned to face her. "But knowing something and feeling something are different things." "What do you feel?" she whispered. Daniel crossed to her, sitting on the edge of the cot. "Like I've been sleepwalking for 5 years and suddenly I'm awake. Like Tommy's not the only one who needed you to walk into our lives. Like letting you leave is going to tear something vital out of me, but I'll do it anyway because it's what's best for you." Tears rolled down Claire's cheeks. "I feel it too," she admitted, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because everyone I've ever loved has either tried to control me or been destroyed by my family. Because you and Tommy have something beautiful, and I won't be the one to ruin it. Because fairy tales aren't real, and the princess doesn't get to run away with the woodcutter and live happily ever after." "Maybe not," Daniel said, wiping her tears gently, "but maybe she gets something better. Maybe she gets to choose her own ending." Before Claire could respond, they heard it. Engines approaching, multiple vehicles by the sound of it. Daniel immediately doused the lantern and moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could see lights through the trees, getting closer. "They found us," he said grimly. "Can you walk?" "I'll have to." Daniel quickly gathered the most essential supplies while Claire struggled to her feet. The antibiotics had helped, but she was still weak, still in pain. "There's an old mine shaft about a mile east," Daniel said. "If we can make it there." The door burst open before he could finish. Marcus Webb stood there with 2 other men, all armed. "Mr. Hayes?" Webb said pleasantly. "Fancy meeting you here." Daniel stepped in front of Claire. "This is private property." "Actually, it's government property, and I have permission to search for a missing person." Webb's smile was cold. "Hello, Claire. Your fiancé is very worried about you." "He's not my fiancé," Claire said, finding strength in her anger. "And I'm not going anywhere with you." "I'm afraid you don't have a choice." Webb nodded to his men. "Restrain Mr. Hayes." The men moved forward, but Daniel was ready. A lifetime of physical labor had made him strong, and desperation made him fierce. He took down the first man with a punch that would have felled a tree, but the second man had a taser. Daniel convulsed and dropped, and Claire screamed, "Stop! I'll come with you, just don't hurt him." "Wise choice," Webb said. He gestured to his men. "Bring her." "Wait," Claire said desperately. "Let me say goodbye." Webb considered, then nodded. 30 seconds. Claire knelt beside Daniel, who was conscious but still shaking from the taser. She leaned close, pretending to embrace him, and whispered urgently in his ear. "Tommy's book, page 47. Remember that." Then louder. "Take care of Tommy. Tell him—" "Time's up," Webb said. The men hauled Claire to her feet and half-carried, half-dragged her to a waiting SUV. The last thing she saw was Daniel struggling to get up, calling her name. The drive was a blur of pain and despair. Webb sat beside her, talking on his phone to someone, Richard, presumably, assuring them that the package had been retrieved. "You won't get away with this," Claire said. "Kidnapping is a federal crime." "Kidnapping?" Webb laughed. "We're simply helping a mentally disturbed woman get the treatment she needs. We have documents signed by your parents authorizing Richard to make medical decisions on your behalf. Those won't hold up. Oh, they will for long enough." Webb's smile was cruel. "By the time any legal challenges work through the system, you'll be Mrs. Richard Blackstone, properly medicated and very compliant." Claire's blood ran cold. They were going to drug her into submission. Mr. Hayes will do nothing if he values his son's safety," Webb interrupted. "Mountain living is dangerous. Accidents happen all the time." "You bastard." "I'm a professional, Miss Whitmore. Nothing personal." Back at the ranger station, Daniel forced himself to his feet despite his muscles still spasming from the taser. He grabbed Tommy's book with shaking hands and turned to page 47. There, in the margin of a story about survival against impossible odds, Claire had written in pencil, "Account number and password. Use it. Save Tommy. Live free." Below was a series of numbers and letters. Daniel stared at it, understanding what she'd done. She'd given him access to her money, or at least some of it, enough to disappear, to start over somewhere safe with Tommy. But that wasn't what she'd really given him. She'd given him permission to let her go, to choose his son over her. Daniel carefully tore out the page and put it in his pocket. Then he did what Claire wouldn't expect, what Webb wouldn't expect, what even he wouldn't have expected of himself a week ago. He went to war. First, he retrieved Tommy from the Petersons, telling them there was a family emergency. Then he drove to Jim Morrison's house and laid out everything: Claire's real identity, the kidnapping, Webb's threats. Jim listened without interrupting, then said, "What do you need?" "I need to get to Denver without being followed. I need someone to watch Tommy, and I need you to call every law enforcement contact you have." "The first two I can do. The third—" "Dan, these people have money and power." "They have Richard Blackstone's money and power," Daniel corrected. "But Claire Whitmore has her own. And more importantly, she has rights. She's being held against her will." "Can you prove it?" Daniel thought about the page in his pocket, about what Claire had given him. "Yes," he said. "I can prove everything." Jim studied him for a moment. "You love her." It wasn't a question, but Daniel answered anyway. "Yes." "Then let's go get her." The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Jim would take Tommy to his sister's house 2 towns over, somewhere safe and hidden. Daniel would use back roads to get to Denver, avoiding any surveillance. Once there, he'd go to the FBI, not local police who might be influenced by Blackstone money. "What if they don't believe you?" Tommy asked when Daniel explained he had to leave. "Then I'll make them believe," Daniel said, hugging his son tightly. "I'll bring her back, buddy. I promise." "Dad?" Tommy pulled back to look at him. "Is Claire going to be our family, for real?" Daniel didn't know how to answer that, so he said, "I hope so." The drive to Denver was the longest 4 hours of Daniel's life. Every car could be Webb's men, every police cruiser could be looking for him, but he made it, pulling into the federal building parking lot just as dawn was breaking. The FBI agents were skeptical at first. A mountain man claiming a billionaire heiress was being held against her will sounded like either a conspiracy theory or a shakedown attempt. But then Daniel showed them the bruises on Claire's body he'd photographed while treating her, the pattern clearly showing abuse. He played a recording he'd made on his phone of Webb threatening him and Tommy. And finally, he showed them something he'd found in Claire's coat, a hidden pocket with documents showing Richard Blackstone had been systematically stealing from her trust fund. "She was running because she discovered the theft," Daniel explained. "Blackstone needs to marry her to cover it up, to gain full control of her assets legally." The agent in charge, a woman named Sarah Chen, studied the evidence. "This is serious," she said. "But we need more. We need proof she's being held against her will right now." Daniel pulled out his phone. "She gave me her password. Check her credit cards. I guarantee they're being used right now, and not by her." Agent Chen made a call. Within minutes, they had confirmation. Claire's cards had been used to check into a private psychiatric facility owned by a company that, through several shell corporations, traced back to Richard Blackstone. "We've got enough for a warrant," Chen said. "But Mr. Hayes, you should know, places like this have lawyers on retainer. They'll fight us." "Then we fight back," Daniel said simply. The raid on the psychiatric facility was swift and decisive. FBI agents swept in with a federal warrant, brushing aside the facility's security and lawyers. They found Claire in a locked room, already showing signs of heavy medication. "Daniel?" she said groggily when she saw him behind the agents. "You came." "I told you," he said, gathering her into his arms. "Family protects each other." Richard Blackstone was arrested on charges of kidnapping, fraud, and false imprisonment. Webb was charged as an accomplice. Claire's parents, faced with evidence of their complicity, quickly distanced themselves from the entire affair. But all of that was just noise to Daniel. What mattered was Claire in his arms, Tommy safe with Jim's sister, and the chance for a future he'd never dared imagine. The media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. The story of the billionaire heiress, the mountain man who saved her, and the corruption that had nearly destroyed her was irresistible. Reporters descended on the small mountain town, looking for Daniel and Tommy. They didn't find them. 3 days after the rescue, Daniel and Claire sat in a hotel room in Denver, watching the news coverage with a mixture of amazement and horror. "They're calling you a hero," Claire said, still weak but improving without the drugs in her system. "They're calling me a gold digger," Daniel corrected, pointing to another headline, suggesting he'd orchestrated everything to get Claire's money. "Do you care?" "Not even a little." He took her hand. "But Claire, we need to talk about what happens next." "I know." She turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking. I can't go back to that life. I won't. But I also can't just disappear to your mountain. The media would never leave us alone. So what do we do?" Claire smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it was without reservation or fear. "We do something unexpected. We tell the truth, all of it, and then we make our own choices." "Which are?" "I want to liquidate most of my assets, set up a trust for Tommy's education, create a foundation for domestic abuse survivors, and then," she squeezed his hand, "then I want to go home. To your cabin. To our cabin, if you'll have me." Daniel's throat was tight with emotion. "You want to live on a mountain with no running water and an outdoor bathroom?" "I want to live an honest life with people who value me for who I am, not what I'm worth." She touched his face gently. "I want to wake up to your face and Tommy's laughter. I want to learn to trap rabbits and make pine needle tea. I want to choose love over money, substance over style, family over fortune." "Your family will disown you." "They already have." "The media will call you crazy." "They already are." "Life on the mountain is hard." "Life without meaning is harder." Daniel kissed her then, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "Tommy's going to be insufferable," Daniel said. "He predicted this from day one. He's a smart kid. He gets it from his father." "And his mother?" Claire said carefully. "Maria must have been extraordinary to raise such a wonderful boy, to inspire such loyalty in you." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "She was, and she would have liked you. She would have said you were exactly what Tommy and I needed." "I hope I can live up to that." "You already have." The press conference was Claire's idea, though Daniel fought it every step of the way. They stood together in a hotel conference room, facing a sea of cameras and reporters, Claire's hand firmly clasped in his. She wore a simple dress she'd bought off the rack, no jewelry except for Maria's wedding band that Daniel had given her that morning, not as a proposal, but as a promise of what could be. "I want to address the speculation about my relationship with Daniel Hayes," Claire began, her voice steady despite the chaos of clicking cameras. "He saved my life, both literally and figuratively. He and his son showed me what real family means, what real love looks like. Not the transactional relationships I was raised with, but genuine care without expectation of reward." "Miss Whitmore," a reporter called out, "are you saying you're choosing to live in poverty with Mr. Hayes?" Claire's laugh was genuine. "I'm saying I'm choosing to live with purpose. Daniel and Tommy Hayes have more wealth in their character than I've seen in any boardroom. As for money, she paused, looking at Daniel. I'm establishing the Maria Hayes Foundation for Rural Education, funded with the majority of my inheritance. Tommy's late mother was a teacher, and this will be her legacy. Daniel hadn't known about this. His throat tightened as Claire continued. Furthermore, I'm creating a network of safe houses for domestic abuse survivors, starting with properties my family owns but never uses. As for myself, I'll keep enough to ensure we can improve the cabin's infrastructure and provide for Tommy's education. Everything else goes to people who need it more than I do. Mr. Hayes, another reporter shouted, what do you say to accusations that you manipulated a vulnerable woman for her money? Daniel stepped forward to the microphone. He'd never spoken to a crowd before, but he thought of Tommy watching this somewhere and found his voice. I say that 2 weeks ago, I found a woman dying in the snow. I didn't know her name, her background, or her bank account. I knew she needed help. That's what decent people do. They help. As for manipulation, he looked directly at the camera. Claire Whitmore is the strongest person I've ever met. No one manipulates her. She makes her own choices, and I'm honored that she's choosing to face life with my son and me. But surely the lifestyle change, someone began. Will be an adjustment, Claire interrupted. But I've had wealth my entire life, and it never brought me peace. It never brought me safety. It certainly never brought me love. A man who owns almost nothing risked everything to protect me. A little boy gave me his favorite book so I wouldn't be lonely. That's worth more than any portfolio. After the conference, they retreated to the hotel room where Tommy was waiting with Jim Morrison, watching everything on television. Did we do good? Tommy asked, launching himself at both of them. You did perfect, Claire said, catching him in a hug despite her still healing ribs. You're famous now. I don't want to be famous, Tommy said seriously. I just want us to go home. Home. The cabin that Claire had seen for less than a week total, yet it called to her more strongly than the mansion she'd grown up in. There's something else, Claire said, pulling back to look at both of them. My parents have agreed to sign papers legally disowning me, cutting all ties. It's what they want. I'm an embarrassment now, but it also means I'm free, completely free. I'm sorry, Daniel said, though he knew she wasn't. Don't be. I'm gaining more than I'm losing. She ruffled Tommy's hair. I'm gaining a real family. The trip back to the mountain was surreal. Reporters tried to follow, but Jim Morrison and his ranger colleagues made sure they got lost on the winding mountain roads. By the time Daniel's truck pulled up to the cabin, they were alone. Claire stood looking at the small structure, seeing it clearly for the first time without the haze of pain and fever. It was rough, certainly, primitive by any standard she'd known, but there was beauty in its simplicity. Honesty in its construction. Second thoughts? Daniel asked, coming to stand beside her. No, she said firmly, but I do have some first thoughts about indoor plumbing. Daniel laughed. With what's left of your money, we can manage that. Solar panels for better electricity, too. Maybe even internet for Tommy's education. Will the neighbors accept me? Claire asked. I'm not exactly what they expected for you. The Petersons already invited us for dinner next week. Sarah asked if you'd help with the school fundraiser, and Doc Harmon sent word that you're officially his most interesting patient ever. Miss Claire, Tommy called from the doorway. Come see. Dad and I made your room while you were gone. They'd converted the small storage room into a bedroom, barely big enough for a bed and dresser, but clean and welcoming. There were wildflowers in a mason jar on the windowsill and a quilt that looked handmade on the bed. Mrs. Peterson made the quilt, Tommy explained. She said every mountain woman needs one. Claire traced the careful stitching, tears threatening. It's perfect. It's temporary, Daniel said from the doorway. Until what? Until they married? Until they built an addition? Until she realized this life was too hard and left? The unfinished sentence hung between them. Until it's not, Claire said simply. That first week was an adjustment for everyone. Claire learned the rhythm of mountain life, hauling water, keeping the fire going, cooking on a wood stove. Her hands, soft despite her recent ordeal, developed blisters from chopping wood. Her designer clothes were replaced with practical flannels and worn jeans from the general store. You're trying too hard, Daniel told her on the fourth day when he found her furiously scrubbing the floor. I need to contribute. You are contributing. You helped Tommy with his homework for 2 hours yesterday. You're teaching him about the world beyond this mountain. That matters more than clean floors. But Maria grew up doing this work. You didn't. Give yourself time to learn. That evening, Claire found a box in the storage room tucked behind old camping equipment. Inside were photographs. Maria and Daniel's wedding, Tommy as a baby, family moments frozen in time. Maria had been beautiful, with dark hair and a smile that seemed to light up every picture. You found them, Daniel said from behind her. I'm sorry, I wasn't snooping. It's okay. I should have shown you before. He sat beside her, picking up a photo of Maria holding infant Tommy. This was 2 weeks before her diagnosis. She was so happy that day. Tell me about her. So he did. He talked about Maria's laugh, her terrible cooking when they first married, her dedication to her students, her fierce love for Tommy. He talked until the sun set and the cabin grew dark except for the fire's glow. She would have liked you, he said finally. Even though I'm taking her place? You're not taking her place. You're making your own place. Maria would understand that. She'd want us to be happy. Claire leaned against his shoulder. Are you happy? Happier than I've been in 5 years, Daniel admitted, but also terrified. Why? Because I'm falling in love with you, and the last time I loved someone, I lost them. Claire turned to face him. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel Hayes. You're stuck with me. Even when the novelty wears off? When winter comes and you're tired of being cold and isolated? Even then. She kissed him softly. I've had everything money could buy. Now I want everything it can't. Their relationship deepened gradually, carefully. Daniel was respectful of her trauma with Richard, never pushing, always letting her set the pace. Claire, in turn, was mindful of Maria's memory, not trying to replace her but finding her own role in their small family. Tommy was the bridge between them, accepting Claire with the pure heart of childhood while keeping his mother's memory alive through stories and traditions. Mom always made special pancakes on Sundays, he told Claire one morning, with faces on them. I don't know how to make pancake faces, Claire admitted. I'll teach you, Tommy said excitedly. Dads are terrible, but don't tell him. I can hear you, Daniel called from outside. They laughed, and Claire realized this was what she'd been missing her entire life. Not just love, but lightness, the ability to find joy in small moments. The legal battles with Richard Blackstone continued in the background. Claire gave depositions via video call, testified remotely when necessary, but refused to return to Denver. Her lawyers, paid for with the money she'd kept, handled everything else. He's claiming you were having an affair with me before you ran, Daniel told her after one call with the lawyers. Says that's why you left. Let him claim whatever he wants. We know the truth. It doesn't bother you? What bothers me is that I wasted so many years trying to please people who saw me as property. She looked around the cabin, at Tommy doing homework, at Daniel mending fishing nets. This is real. Everything else is just noise. One day, a package arrived via Jim Morrison. Claire's mother had sent it, not directly, but through lawyers. Inside was Claire's grandmother's jewelry box and a note. These were meant for you regardless of circumstances. Claire opened the box to find not the ostentatious pieces she expected, but simple, elegant items. A pearl necklace, a gold locket, diamond earrings that were beautiful but not gaudy. My grandmother was different, Claire explained to Daniel. She married for love, not money. My grandfather was a school teacher. They only became wealthy later through investments and luck. She never forgot where she came from. Inside the locket was a picture of Claire as a baby and an inscription. True wealth is measured in love given and received. She would have loved this place, Claire said softly. Maybe that's where you get it from, Daniel suggested, the ability to see beyond surface things. Autumn arrived with a burst of color that took Claire's breath away. The mountains became a canvas of gold and red, and she understood why Daniel had chosen this place to heal after Maria's death. It's like the world is on fire, she told Tommy as they collected leaves for a school project. Dad says it's nature's way of showing off before winter, Tommy replied. Like it's saying, remember me when everything's white and cold. Claire helped him arrange the leaves, teaching him about photosynthesis and why leaves changed color. Knowledge from her expensive education finally finding practical use. "You're really smart," Tommy said admiringly. "Like teacher smart. Your mom was a teacher. Maybe you could be one too. Our school needs more teachers. Mrs. Patterson says so all the time." The idea planted itself in Claire's mind. She had a degree, though it was in business, not education. But she could get certified, could contribute to the community that had accepted her so readily. That evening, she brought it up to Daniel. "I want to be useful," she said. "Really useful, not just playing at being a mountain woman." "You are useful. I want to teach, Daniel. Help kids like Tommy, who are brilliant but isolated. Maybe use some of the foundation money to improve the school. Bring in technology. Connect them to the wider world without losing what makes this place special." Daniel studied her face, seeing the determination there. "It's a 2-hour round trip to the school. Roads are dangerous in winter. Then I'll learn to drive in snow. The pay is almost nothing. I don't need pay. I need purpose. The certification process, well, it's Daniel." She took his hands. "Stop trying to protect me from hard choices. I'm not fragile, not anymore." He pulled her close. "I know. That's what scares me. You're so strong now, you don't need us." "Need and want are different things," Claire said against his chest. "I don't need you to survive anymore. But I want you. Want this life. Want to build something beautiful with you and Tommy. That's so much more powerful than need." The first snow came early that year, catching them all by surprise. Claire woke to find the world transformed, every harsh edge softened by white. "Snow day!" Tommy shouted, jumping on her bed. They'd moved it to the main room near the stove as the storage room was too cold now. "What's a snow day?" Claire asked, though she was laughing at his enthusiasm. "No school. We get to play and drink hot chocolate, and Dad tells stories, and we stay warm by the fire all day." It was during that first snow day that Daniel proposed, not with a ring or grand gesture, but with simple words by the fire while Tommy slept. "Marry me," he said suddenly, looking at her across the room where she was reading one of his books. Claire looked up, startled. "What?" "I know it's too soon. I know you just got free from one man trying to force you into marriage. But Claire, I need you to know. I want you to be my wife, Tommy's mother. Not now if you're not ready. Maybe not ever if you don't want it. But I needed to say it, to put it out there." Claire set down her book and crossed to him. "Ask me again. Claire Whitmore, will you marry me? Not for money or status, or because anyone expects it, but because I love you and want to spend whatever time we have left on this earth together?" "Yes," she said simply. "But not as Claire Whitmore. She doesn't exist anymore, legally or emotionally. Ask Claire." "Just Claire?" "Just Claire. The woman you saved, who fell in love with you and Tommy, who wants nothing more than this life you've built." "Then just Claire. Will you marry Daniel Hayes, poor mountain man with a son and more baggage than assets?" "Yes." She laughed through tears. "Yes to all of it." They were married 2 weeks later in the Petersons' living room with Jim Morrison officiating. Apparently being a ranger came with that ability. Claire wore a simple dress from town, Daniel wore his only suit, and Tommy was the ring bearer with rings they'd bought from the general store. The ceremony was witnessed by a handful of neighbors who'd become friends. Doc Harmon gave Claire away, saying it was the least he could do for his most interesting patient. Mrs. Patterson cried. Sarah Peterson was the maid of honor, thrilled to be part of what she called the romance of the century. "Do you, Claire, take this man?" Jim began. "Just Claire," she corrected. "No last name." Jim smiled. "Do you, just Claire, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." The reception was in the cabin, everyone crowding in with potluck dishes and homemade gifts. There was no fancy cake, just Mrs. Peterson's apple pie. No champagne, just Jim's homemade cider. No orchestra, just Robert Peterson's fiddle and stories told by firelight. "This is perfect," Claire told Daniel as they slow danced to the fiddle music, Tommy standing on their feet between them. "It's not what you dreamed of as a little girl," Daniel said. "No," Claire agreed. "It's better. It's real." That night, after everyone had left and Tommy was asleep, Daniel and Claire stood outside looking at the stars. countless and brilliant in the clear mountain air. No regrets? Daniel asked. Only one, Claire said. I wish I'd fallen down that mountain sooner. They laughed, the sound echoing through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled warmly. Tommy stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about pancakes. Their life was simple, some would say poor, but Claire knew better now. She was the richest woman in the world. The news of their marriage made headlines briefly. Billionaire heiress marries mountain man in cabin ceremony. But Claire and Daniel ignored it all. They had more important things to focus on, like Claire's teacher certification, improving the cabin for winter, and preparing for the custody hearing Richard's lawyers had vindictively initiated, claiming Daniel was an unfit father. Let them come, Daniel said grimly when they received the notice. I've been Tommy's sole parent for 5 years. No court will take him from me. They'll use me against you, Claire worried. Say you exposed him to danger by helping me. Then we'll fight back with truth. Tommy's grades have improved since you've been helping him. The school will testify to that. Doc Harmon will confirm he's healthy and happy. The whole community will stand behind us. And they did. When the hearing came, the small courthouse was packed with neighbors ready to testify on Daniel's behalf. The judge, who'd grown up in these mountains himself, saw through Richard's lawyer's tactics immediately. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, I see a father who's sacrificed everything for his son, who's built a stable, if unconventional, home, and who's now provided Tommy with a loving stepmother. Case dismissed. Richard's final attempt at revenge had failed, and with his criminal trial looming, he had bigger problems than Claire's new life. Winter settled over the mountain like a thick blanket, isolating them from the world below. But the cabin was warm, filled with laughter and love. Claire learned to navigate the challenges, frozen water pipes, snowdrifts blocking the door, the generator failing during a blizzard. You're tougher than you look, Daniel told her one morning, after she'd helped him fix the generator in sub-zero temperatures. I had good teachers, she replied, kissing his frostbitten cheek. Tommy thrived with Claire's help in his education. She taught him about art, history, science beyond his textbooks. She connected him with online resources using the satellite internet they'd installed. His world expanded even as winter kept them physically confined. Claire's the best teacher ever, he told Mrs. Patterson during one of their video calls for remote learning. She makes everything interesting. Then perhaps she should be teaching more children, Mrs. Us, Patterson said thoughtfully, planting seeds for the future. One evening, as a particularly fierce storm raged outside, Claire found Daniel staring at the photo of Maria he kept on the shelf. Missing her? She asked gently. Thanking her, Daniel replied, for sending you to us. You think she did? The storm that brought you here was unexpected, unseasonable. You fell at the exact spot where I'd check my traps. An hour either way, and I'd have missed you. He turned to her. That's either fate or Maria pulling strings from wherever she is. Claire leaned into him. Then I'm thanking her too. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Claire received word that Richard had been convicted on all counts. He would spend the next 20 years in prison. Her parents, tainted by association, had retreated from society. The Whitmore empire was in chaos. You could claim your share, Daniel pointed out. Help stabilize things, protect jobs. No, Claire said firmly. That life is dead to me. The lawyers can handle the dissolution. The workers will find new jobs. I'm not going back, not even to help. No regrets? None. Although, she smiled mysteriously. There is something I want to tell you. What? She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. We're going to need to build that addition after all. Daniel's eyes widened. You're pregnant. About 6 weeks. Doc Harmon confirmed it yesterday. Daniel pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. A baby? We're having a baby? We're having a baby, Claire confirmed. A mountain baby who'll grow up knowing they're loved, valued for who they are, not what they have. Tommy's going to be over the moon. Tommy already knows. He was with me at Doc's. He's already planning to teach the baby everything about survival and reading and making pancake faces. Of course he is. Daniel kissed her deeply. I love you. Just Claire Hayes. I love you too, Daniel Hayes. Thank you for saving me in every possible way. You saved us right back, he said. We were surviving. You taught us to live again. That night, as they told the neighbors their news, as Tommy excitedly planned his big brother duties, as the fire crackled and friends toasted with homemade cider, Claire thought about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been Claire Whitmore, billionaire heiress, prisoner in a golden cage. She'd had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. Now she was just Claire Hayes, wife of a mountain man, stepmother to an incredible boy, expectant mother, soon-to-be teacher. She hauled water, chopped wood, and could make a decent rabbit stew. She was, by any measure her old world would use, a failure. She'd given up billions for a cabin without running water. She'd traded designer clothes for flannel and denim. She'd chosen love over luxury, purpose over privilege. She'd never been happier. As the celebration continued around her, Claire stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The stars were brilliant overhead, the mountain peaks silhouetted against the night sky. The air was crisp, clean, real. "Thank you," she whispered to Maria, to fate, to whatever force had brought her tumbling down that mountainside into Daniel's arms. The door opened behind her, and Daniel stepped out, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Come inside," he said. "Your family's waiting." Her family. Not the one she'd been born into, but the one she'd chosen, the one that had chosen her back. "Did you ever think," she asked as they turned to go inside, "when you found me in that snowbank, that we'd end up here?" "Honestly? I thought you'd die that first night. Then I thought you'd leave as soon as you could walk. Then I thought you'd realize what you were giving up and run back to your old life." He stopped, turning her to face him. "But somewhere along the way, I started to hope. And now I can't imagine any other ending to our story." "This isn't an ending," Claire corrected. "It's a beginning." Inside, Tommy was regaling the neighbors with the story of how his dad had saved Claire, how she'd saved them right back, how they were all a family now, with a baby on the way. It had already become legend in his telling, a fairy tale of sorts, though every word was true. "And they lived happily ever after?" Sarah Peterson asked, teasing. Tommy looked at his father and stepmother, at their neighbors who'd become family, at the simple cabin that was their castle. "No," he said, with the wisdom of a child who'd learned that life was more complex than fairy tales. They lived happily right now, and tomorrow, and all the days after that they could grab hold of. Daniel and Claire exchanged glances over his head, marveling at his insight. Spring transformed the mountain into something magical, and Claire, now showing at 5 months pregnant, stood in what would become the new addition to their cabin. Daniel and several neighbors were raising the frame, their voices carrying across the valley as they worked in the ancient rhythm of community barn raising. "Careful with that beam, Peterson," Daniel called out, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "That's going to hold my children's bedroom." Children, plural. The ultrasound had revealed twins, a boy and a girl, sending Tommy into ecstatic preparations for his dual role as big brother. Claire watched him now, fetching tools for the men, trying so hard to be helpful despite his small size. "You should be resting," Doc Harmon said, approaching with a glass of water. He'd become their unofficial medical advisor, refusing payment but accepting Claire's homemade bread as trade. "I'm pregnant, not broken," Claire replied, though she accepted the water gratefully. "Besides, I want to watch our home grow." Their home. Even after all these months, the words still felt like a miracle. The cabin that had once seemed so small now sprawled with purpose. The original structure, the new addition being built with money from selling one piece of her grandmother's jewelry, the greenhouse Claire had insisted on for year-round vegetables. "Mrs. Hayes!" Sarah Peterson came running, her face flushed with excitement. "There's a fancy car coming up the mountain road, really fancy." Claire's blood chilled. Even with Richard in prison, she never fully relaxed when unexpected visitors arrived. Daniel must have sensed her tension because he immediately climbed down from the frame, hammer still in hand. "Tommy, take Sarah inside," he said quietly. His son obeyed without question, recognizing the tone. They waited, Daniel's hand finding Claire's, as a black Mercedes navigated the rough road with obvious difficulty. When it finally stopped, Claire gasped. The woman who emerged was elegant even in her 70s, silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing clothes that cost more than the cabin's entire construction. "Grandmother?" Claire whispered. Eleanor Whitmore surveyed the scene. The half-built addition, the men in work clothes watching warily, her granddaughter in oversized flannel and worn jeans, obviously pregnant. "Hello, darling," Eleanor said simply. "May I come in?" The cabin felt even smaller with Eleanor Whitmore's presence. She sat at their humble table, her designer suit incongruous against the rough-hewn wood, while Claire made tea with shaking hands. "Your mother told me you were dead to the family," Eleanor said without preamble, "that you'd lost your mind, married some mountain person, given away your inheritance." "All true except the losing my mind part," Claire replied, setting down the tea with more force than necessary. Eleanor's lips twitched. "Yes, I rather thought so. Your mother was always prone to dramatics." She looked around the cabin, taking in Tommy's homework on the table, Daniel's rifle by the door, the photos on the mantel, including one from their wedding. "So this is the life you've chosen." "This is the life I've built," Claire corrected, "with Daniel and Tommy. And these?" Eleanor gestured to Claire's pregnant belly. "Your great-grandchildren, twins." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, sipping her tea. Daniel stood protectively behind Claire's chair, his presence solid and reassuring. "I'm dying," Eleanor said suddenly. "Pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe 4. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Despite everything, she'd loved her grandmother, the only person in her family who'd shown her genuine affection. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm 93. I've had a good run." Eleanor set down her teacup. "But before I go, I needed to see for myself what became of you. Your parents painted quite a picture. Mental breakdown, manipulation, a con artist taking advantage of you." "Daniel saved my life," Claire said firmly. "In every way a person can be saved." Eleanor studied Daniel then, really looked at him. "You're the man who stood up to Richard Blackstone." "I'm the man who loves your granddaughter," Daniel replied simply. "And asked for nothing in return?" "I asked for everything. Her presence, her partnership, her promise to build a life together. Money had nothing to do with it." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I believe you." She turned back to Claire. "You look happy. Genuinely happy, not the performed happiness of our world." "I am happy." "Then I have a proposition." Eleanor pulled out a document. "Your parents want to contest my will. They believe I'm leaving everything to charity, since you've been disowned. They're wrong." Claire stared at the paper. "Grandmother, no, I don't want—" "Hush. It's not money, not directly. It's the cabin in Switzerland, the one where you spent summers as a child. The one place you were ever truly free, you once told me." Claire's eyes filled with tears. She had loved that cabin, the only simple place in their complex world. "It's yours, along with a trust that pays for its upkeep. But there's a condition." "There always is," Daniel muttered. Eleanor smiled. "Indeed. The condition is that you use it as part of your foundation, a retreat for families escaping abuse, a place to heal. Run it however you see fit, but keep it as a sanctuary." Claire looked at Daniel, who nodded slightly. "We accept." "Good." Eleanor stood, then swayed slightly. Daniel caught her arm, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "Thank you," Eleanor told him, "for seeing her worth beyond her wealth." "That was the easy part," Daniel replied. Eleanor stayed for dinner, an surreal evening of rabbit stew and cornbread served to a woman who'd dined with presidents. But she ate with genuine appreciation, listened to Tommy's excited chatter about becoming a big brother, and even helped with dishes despite Claire's protests. "I haven't washed a dish in 60 years, Eleanor mused, hands in soapy water. "I'd forgotten how satisfying it is." As darkness fell, Daniel offered to drive Eleanor's driver back to their hotel in town. The Mercedes would never make it back down the mountain in the dark. "I'll return tomorrow," Eleanor said, "if you'll have me. I'd like to spend what time I have left getting to know my real granddaughter, not the performance she gave for 29 years. After she left, Claire sat by the fire, overwhelmed. Daniel joined her, pulling her into his arms. "You okay?" "She's the only one who ever really saw me," Claire said, "and now she's dying." "Then we make the most of the time left," Daniel said practically. That's all anyone can do. Eleanor returned the next day, and the next, each time dressed down a little more, until by the fourth day she arrived in jeans and a sweater. Expensive ones, but still. I fired the driver, she announced. Rented a pickup truck. The man at the rental place looked at me like I'd lost my mind. She stayed for a week, sleeping on an air mattress in the main room, learning to tend the fire, helping Claire with her teacher certification studies. She and Tommy became fast friends, the boy showing her his collections of rocks and leaves with the same enthusiasm he'd show any grandmother. He's brilliant, Eleanor told Claire one evening. That brain, properly nurtured, could change the world. We're working on nurturing, Claire replied. Daniel's building him a proper study space in the addition. About that, Eleanor said carefully. I know you've refused money, but would you accept materials? I have connections in construction. They owe me favors. Claire started to refuse, then saw the hope in her grandmother's eyes, the need to contribute, to be part of building something rather than just maintaining wealth. Only if you help choose them, Claire said. Eleanor's smile was radiant. The addition came together quickly after that. Eleanor's favors resulted in trucks of high-quality materials arriving daily, insulation that would keep them warm through the harshest winter, solar panels for sustainable electricity, a composting toilet system that would revolutionize their daily life. You said materials, Daniel said, eyeing the solar panel installation crew Eleanor had somehow procured. Installation is part of the material package, Eleanor said innocently. Read the fine print. The birthing room, because Claire had decided to have the twins at home with Doc Harmon attending, was Eleanor's special project. She researched everything, consulted with midwives, made sure they had every possible necessity. I won't be here when they're born, she said matter-of-factly, but I want to know they arrived safely in a space made with love. The comment hung heavy until Tommy piped up. You could be wrong. Doc says doctors don't know everything. Maybe you'll live longer. Eleanor hugged him tightly. From your mouth to God's ears, young man. As spring turned to summer, Claire began teaching at the local school part-time. Her certification rushed through thanks to Mrs. Patterson's advocacy and the desperate need for qualified teachers. Her classroom was a mix of ages and abilities, but she loved the challenge. Mrs. Hayes makes learning fun, one student told their parent, who then told everyone at the general store. Soon, Claire had requests for after-school tutoring, which she conducted at the cabin. The small home became a hub of learning, with children sprawled on the floor doing homework, while Daniel worked on the addition and Eleanor told stories of her travels. You've built something special here, Eleanor observed one evening, watching Claire help 3 different children with 3 different subjects, while Daniel cooked dinner and Tommy read to a younger student. We've built a family, Claire corrected, an unconventional one, but a family nonetheless. The best families usually are unconventional, Eleanor replied. One morning, Claire woke to find Eleanor sitting by the window, watching the sunrise with tears on her cheeks. It's so beautiful here, the older woman said. I spent my whole life in cities and boardrooms and ballrooms. I never saw a sunrise like this. You could stay, Claire offered, not for the first time. Permanently. No, darling, I have affairs to settle, lawyers to torment, your parents to disinherit. She smiled wickedly. But I'll stay until after the summer festival. Tommy made me promise. The summer festival was the mountain community's biggest event, a celebration of survival, of making it through another winter, of crops planted and children grown taller. This year, Claire and Daniel would present their twins to the community, even though they weren't born yet, in the tradition of mountain families. It's like a baby shower meets a barn dance meets a potluck, Tommy explained to Eleanor. Everyone comes. Eleanor threw herself into preparations with unexpected enthusiasm. She helped Claire bake pies using recipes from Mrs. Peterson. She learned to square dance from Jim Morrison. She even helped Daniel string lights in the trees around their property where they'd host part of the celebration. You're different, Daniel told her one evening as they worked, from when you first arrived. I'm dying, Eleanor said simply. It's remarkably freeing. All the things that seemed important, status, appearance, legacy, none of it matters. Only this matters. Family. Love. Watching my granddaughter bloom into the person she was always meant to be. She was always this person, Daniel said. You just couldn't see it before. No, Eleanor agreed. The money blinded us all. The day of the festival dawned clear and perfect. The cabin and yard were transformed with decorations, tables groaning with food, musicians tuning instruments. Claire, now heavily pregnant, directed traffic, while Daniel and the other men set up. You should rest, everyone told her. I'll rest when I'm dead, she replied, then caught Eleanor's eye. Sorry. Don't be. It's what I would say. The celebration began in the afternoon. The entire mountain community arrived, families Claire had come to know and love over the months. The Petersons with their extended family, Doc Harmon with his fiddle, Mrs. Patterson with her husband and grandchildren, Jim Morrison in his best flannel. We want to say something, Robert Peterson announced, calling for attention. Daniel and Claire Hayes have become pillars of our community. Claire's teaching our children, preparing them for a wider world while keeping them rooted here. Daniel's helping everyone with construction, repairs, whatever's needed. They've shown us that community isn't about what you have, but what you give. Here, here, the crowd cheered. So we want to present them with this. Robert pulled out a handmade quilt, created by all the women in the community, each square representing a different family. For the new babies, so they know from day one that they're surrounded by love. Claire couldn't speak through her tears. Daniel accepted the quilt with reverent hands. Thank you, he managed, all of you, for accepting us, supporting us, being our family. The music started then, fiddles and guitars filling the mountain air. Eleanor danced with Tommy, her elegant bearing oddly suited to the mountain stomp. Claire watched from a chair, her hand on her belly, feeling the twins move to the rhythm. They're dancing, she told Daniel. They know they're home, he replied, kissing her forehead. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains gold and purple, Eleanor took the makeshift stage. I know I'm an outsider here, she began, a city woman with soft hands and too much money, but you've welcomed me because you welcomed my granddaughter, and for that, I'm forever grateful. She paused, gathering herself. I won't be here much longer, but before I go, I want you to know that I'm leaving an endowment for this school, for this community. Not charity. Investment. Investment in children like Tommy, who deserve every opportunity. Investment in teachers like Claire, who see potential where others see poverty. Investment in men like Daniel, who build homes and hearts with equal skill. The silence was profound. Then Tommy started clapping, and everyone joined in. We don't need, Jim Morrison started. No, you don't need, Eleanor agreed, but you deserve. There's a difference. Later, as the party continued under stars and string lights, Claire found her grandmother sitting alone on the porch. You've given too much, Claire said. I've given barely a fraction of what I have. And it's not giving, it's returning. Wealth should flow, not stagnate. Your parents never understood that. Have you told them? About the will changes? Eleanor's smile was sharp. Tomorrow. I'm meeting them in Denver tomorrow. They think I'm coming to discuss reinstating you. They're in for a surprise. Be gentle, Claire said, though she didn't mean it. I'll be honest. That's harder for them to bear than cruelty. Eleanor left the next morning, her rented pickup loaded with preserves from Mrs. Peterson, Tommy's artwork, and a small wooden box Daniel had carved for her. For your medications, he'd said gruffly, so you have something beautiful to look at. She'd hugged him then, this woman who never showed physical affection, and whispered, take care of them. With my life, he'd promised. 2 days later, Claire received a call. Not about Eleanor's meeting with her parents, but from the hospital. Eleanor had collapsed in the hotel. She was asking for Claire. Daniel drove like a man possessed, making the trip to Denver in half the time it should have taken. They arrived to find Eleanor in a private room, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. Don't look so tragic, she said weakly. I got to see you happy. That's more than I hoped for. Grandmother, your parents were here. I told them everything. They're furious, but impotent. The papers are signed, filed, irreversible. She smiled. Your mother actually stamped her foot like a child, 61 years old and stamping her foot. I don't care about them. Good. Don't waste energy on those who choose blindness. Eleanor reached for Claire's hand. The twins, promise me you'll name one Eleanor if it's a girl. The girl will be Eleanor Maria, Claire said, after the two women who taught me about love. Eleanor's eyes filled. And the boy? Thomas Daniel, after his father and brother. Perfect. Eleanor's breathing was labored now. Daniel, come here. Daniel approached the bed, taking Eleanor's other hand. You saved her, Eleanor said. But more than that, you loved her without trying to change her. That's rare. She was perfect already, Daniel said simply. Just needed to be seen. Eleanor smiled. Tommy? The boy climbed carefully onto the bed, curling against the dying woman's side. You're going to be an amazing big brother, Eleanor told him, and an amazing man. Be like your father, strong and gentle in equal measure. I will, Tommy promised solemnly. Will it hurt, dying? No, sweetheart. It's like going to sleep after the most wonderful day. She died that night, holding Claire's hand while Daniel held Claire and Tommy slept in the chair beside them. Her last words were, "Thank you for the sunrise." The funeral was a battle. Claire's parents wanted a society affair, all pomp and circumstance. Claire wanted something simple, meaningful. In the end, Eleanor's lawyer produced a letter with explicit instructions: cremation, ashes to be scattered on the mountain where she'd spent her last good days. She can't be serious, Claire's mother had said, looking at Claire for the first time in months. Our mother, scattered in the wilderness like some hippie? Your mother, Claire corrected. My grandmother. And yes, that's exactly what she wanted. They held the memorial at the cabin. Half the mountain community came, not because they'd known Eleanor long, but because she'd become one of theirs in the end. Jim Morrison spoke about transformation. Mrs. Patterson read a poem Eleanor had loved. Tommy sang a song he'd learned at school about going home. As they scattered her ashes in the meadow behind the cabin, where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color, Claire felt the first contraction. Daniel, she said calmly, I think Eleanor's going to meet the twins after all. The labor was long but uncomplicated. Doc Harmon arrived quickly, along with Mrs. Patterson, who delivered babies before modern hospitals reached the mountain. Daniel never left Claire's side, breathing with her, supporting her, whispering encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. You're the strongest person I know, he told her during a brief respite between contractions. You left everything, survived a mountain, fought off predators, built a new life. This is just one more mountain to climb. Tommy waited in the main room with the Petersons, his ear pressed to the door despite being told not to eavesdrop. Eleanor Maria arrived first, screaming and perfect, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. Thomas Daniel followed 15 minutes later, quiet and observant, taking in the world with serious consideration. They're perfect, Daniel breathed, holding both babies while Claire recovered. Absolutely perfect. They're ours, Claire corrected, exhausted but euphoric. That's even better than perfect. Tommy was allowed in then, approaching slowly as if the babies might break. They're so small, he whispered. You were smaller, Daniel told him, 6 pounds even. Really? Really, and look how big and strong you are now. Tommy studied his siblings with intense concentration. I'm going to teach them everything, he declared. Reading and math and tracking and fishing and which berries are safe and how to make snow angels and breathe, buddy, Daniel laughed. They need to learn to hold their heads up first. As the sun set on that momentous day, Claire sat nursing Eleanor while Daniel held Thomas, and Tommy read softly from his Jack London book. The cabin was crowded with love, with promise, with the beautiful chaos of family. Your grandmother would have loved this, Daniel said. She did love it, Claire replied. She saw it coming, that's why she could let go. Outside, the mountain stood eternal, witness to another generation born to its slopes. The fancy world Claire had left behind continued spinning without her, deals made and broken, fortunes gained and lost. But inside the cabin, in the warm glow of lantern light, the only fortune that mattered was measured in heartbeats and held breaths, in first smiles and tiny fingers wrapped around larger ones. We did it, Claire told Daniel that night as they lay with the twins between them, Tommy asleep in his loft above. We actually did it. Did what? Built a life. A real life, not a performance or an expectation. Something true. Daniel kissed her gently. We're just getting started. These two are going to turn everything upside down. Good, Claire said. The best things usually do. A year later, the cabin had evolved into something unrecognizable from the simple structure where Daniel had first brought Claire. The addition was complete. 3 bedrooms, a real bathroom with Eleanor's composting toilet system, a mudroom for winter gear. Solar panels provided consistent electricity. The greenhouse produced vegetables year-round. Claire's teaching had expanded too. She now ran an after-school program funded by Eleanor's endowment, bringing technology and broader education to mountain children while respecting their roots. The program had attracted attention from education reformers, but Claire refused all interviews. I'm not a symbol, she told one persistent reporter. I'm just a teacher doing her job. The twins had grown into distinct personalities. Eleanor was bold and laughing, always reaching for new things. Thomas was thoughtful and careful, studying the world before engaging with it. Both were adored by their big brother, who took his responsibilities seriously. Ellie tried to eat a bug today, Tommy reported at dinner. I stopped her. Good job, buddy, Daniel said. Though in survival situations, bugs are actually good protein. Daniel, Claire protested. What? It's true. Their evening was interrupted by a knock. Unusual, as neighbors typically called out rather than knocked. Daniel opened the door to find a young woman, perhaps 25, with a black eye and a split lip, holding the hand of a small boy. I'm sorry, she said quickly. Jim Morrison said, he said you might help. My ex, he found us at the shelter in Denver. We need somewhere to hide just for a few days until my sister can come get us. Daniel and Claire exchanged glances. Without hesitation, Claire stepped forward. Come in, she said. You're safe here. The woman, Sarah, and her son Michael stayed for 2 weeks. Claire recognized the look in Sarah's eyes, the same trapped desperation she'd once felt. Daniel recognized it too, and together they provided not just shelter, but sanctuary. Why? Sarah asked one evening as she helped Claire with the twins. Why help strangers? Because someone helped me when I was a stranger, Claire replied. And that saved my life in every way that matters. When Sarah's sister arrived to take them to Canada, to a new life with new names, Sarah hugged Claire tightly. I'll never forget this, she whispered. Pay it forward, Claire whispered back. Someday someone else will need what you can give. After they left, Daniel found Claire on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. We're going to do this again, aren't we? He said. Help others escape. If you're willing. I'm willing. He pulled her close. It's what Eleanor would want. It's what Maria would want. It's what's right. It could be dangerous. So was saving you. Best danger I ever faced. And so the cabin became more than a home. It became a way station on an underground railroad of sorts, a place where those fleeing abuse could rest, regroup, and find their way to new lives. They were careful, selective, working with Jim and Doc Harmon to verify stories and ensure safety. But over the months that followed, they helped a dozen families find freedom. The mountain community, in its quiet way, supported them. No one asked questions when strangers appeared and disappeared. Everyone contributed, food, clothes, distraction when needed. It was what they did, how they survived, by taking care of each other. We're rich, Tommy announced one evening, apropos of nothing. We have everything we need, Daniel agreed, thinking the boy meant their improved circumstances. No, Tommy said. We're rich in the real way. We have each other and friends and people who need us and people we can help. That's the best kind of rich. Claire looked around their table, Daniel feeding Thomas mashed carrots, Eleanor in her high chair banging a spoon and laughing, Tommy doing homework while simultaneously making faces at his sister.